Good evening and welcome. This is the September 13th, 2023 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses including planned developments, zoning relief, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo? Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Linwall?
Here.
Commissioner Marinchev?
Here.
Commissioner Poctel?
Here.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Here.
Chair Rogers?
Here. So with 6 members present, we do have a quorum. Also present tonight from city staff are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones, Assistant City Attorney Brian George, Liz Williams, the Planning Manager, and Kate Sterling, who is a planner. This is a formal hearing and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time so that all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. After that, persons wishing to make a statement regarding the matter will have a chance to do so. Any person with a legal interest in property located within the defined notification requirements of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the commission will close the record and begin deliberations to consider the standards. The commission will make formal findings of fact based on the testimony and evidence presented, guided by the standards, the commissioner's knowledge of our community, and the recommendations of staff. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and corresponding staff memorandum. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the public comment sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We do have 3 items on the agenda this evening. I'm just taking attendance at this point. Is the applicant for 1404 Judson present? All right, 1041 Ridge Court and 504 through 514 South Boulevard. Oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure they're here. Yep. All right, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure they were physically in the building. We don't have any minutes to approve this evening, so we will begin by going into the first matter on the agenda, which is 1404 Judson Avenue, 23 ZMJV 0041. I don't know who's presenting this. Are you presenting, Mr. Sterling? Okay. So if you please read that into the record.
1404 Judson Avenue, case number 23 ZMJV 0041. Errol Kirsch, architect and applicant on behalf of the property owner, requests the following major zoning variations: to expand a non-conforming structure as it relates to bulk, Code Section 6652, a rear yard setback of 3.75 feet where 30 feet is required and the existing legally non-conforming condition is 2.75 feet, Code Section 6828A4, in building lot coverage of 33.25%, where 30% is the maximum permitted and 31% is the existing legally nonconforming condition, Code Section 6827. The Land Use Commission is the determining body for the proposed zoning relief in accordance with Code Section 2194E.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us tonight on this matter to be sworn. If you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Thank you. At this point, Mr. Kirsch, would you like to come up, introduce yourself to us?
Yes, Errol Kirsch, architect, representing the client, which would be Brooke Harper, who resides at the address we're discussing this evening. That address is 1404 Judson. My address is in Oak Park at 1046 Fair Oaks in that community.
Thank you. And if you'd please tell us about your project.
Okay. First, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. As you know, we were presenting to the Preservation Commission last evening, so hopefully all this information is fresh in at least our minds to make that presentation to you folks. During that session last evening, we made note of the fact that on the date of 7/6, followed by the date of 7/25, we created an alternative plan in response to that commission's requirements and comments. And we also send those alterations to the neighboring folks who appeared at that meeting and did so on August 15th. We requested commentary and response, and none was provided. So, last evening, in our presentation, we were approved in a vote of 5-3 for the issues that relate to the Preservation Commission. I believe the second point, which was our request to have a positive recommendation to you folks, was not approved. And I do feel, and I want to make note that I think several zoning issues overlapped that series of discussion that occurred in regards to that request for a recommendation. I think there were also statements made during that session which led the board to believe that alternative entries could be provided for access of the ADU unit, which is not the case, and also, pardon me, that there were alternative locations for the office space, which is the subject for this evening's discussion on the addition, which is for the purpose of the office area. So with that in mind, I'd like to go through our application sent to you folks and address the standards that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay? Could I ask that the site plan be brought up on the viewing screen?
I want you to give me a minute because I'll need to pull up the
Okay.
packet for that.
The purpose of doing so, folks, is to give you some sense of orientation to where these spaces are within this home. It is an existing 125-year-old facility done by a architect of note, Mr. Hunt, who has several other examples in this community. This is a landmarked facility that we're talking about. The questions at hand are justification that the owner of this property did not create the circumstances that have brought her in front of you. Those circumstances are that the building was built without a rear yard, or, unbeknownst to me, that the rear yard was at some point sold off before the zoning code ever existed, that created an existing rear yard of 2.75 feet. We've increased that a small amount just to make sure that the west side of the addition was a little further than trying to butt it against the same line of the existing rear wall of the building. In our search for alternative locations to try and solve the problem of giving a secure, unrelated to residential use, location for this office, we sought the rear, which is not possible, and when you see the screen, you'll understand the implication of not being able to put it in the rear yard. That does not exist. It cannot go to the front of the building, and the reason for that is the preservation and conservation of the historical elements. If you could stop right at that location there, that is, I believe, the first floor plan. Could you go backwards to the previous plan? The other way, please. Thank you. That is the basement plan and location that I'd like to have you orient the position of the office addition, upper left-hand corner. Directly below that, in an existing area, would be the workshop that the owner currently uses and would continue to use to provide the restoration portion of this project. Specifically, larger woodworking equipment, there are 5 major pieces, and a container to put windows within to, when entering steam into that box, you remove the paint and unsecure the glazing compound to remove the glass. This has allowed her in the last year or more to begin the restoration of the windows, and I might add, this is at a cost she's providing the materials and the labor for, which would be probably almost double the cost of putting a new window in, just so the landmark respect is given to the exterior in this particular case of the project. The space to the right, the large open space with 2 columns within it, is for the ADU unit. It has an entry on the north side, which is the top wall, and directly adjacent to that is a recessed area for an exit window from that living room space. I should say living room and dining room space. Behind that, at the bottom of the sheet to the right and left, are the 2 bedrooms, each having an exit capability through their window. And in particular, we show the property line, which is in the center of the demising wall between this unit, my client, and the neighbor next door. We're respecting that property line by keeping any recessed exit area from that window, from that bedroom, on this property, not letting it overlap. But I'd like to also add that what you might be familiar with seeing is a semicircular corrugated metal sunken into the ground to allow you to make that window lower in the wall to meet the exit requirements. We do not do that form of change to the exterior. We recess it, terrace it up and out, landscape it to hold the land, and then put a small mushroom low wattage light in that same area. 2 purposes. Don't change the environment, and if you do, make it transitional on the exterior, and at the same time, give the occupant within the space an ability to see out and destroy the basement feeling. In the center between those 2 rooms would be the kitchen space and a full bathroom. This facility would have ejector pumps and some pumps to handle any water management and meet the code on the bathroom requirement. Could you move up, please, to the first floor? Thank you. Access to this unit was part of our alteration of our initial submission. And that was to change a linear stair, which you now see against the counter peninsula of the kitchen, into a circular stair. The purpose of doing so is to eliminate a portion of the exterior shell that we had to add to original submission, which more complicated and added to the impact of that exterior view. I think your packet includes 3 exterior views seen from the northeast, looking in the opposite direction. We tried to show first, if you could bring up that exterior view, please. It would be further down on your presentation. Thank you. Keep going. There we go. Thanks. This view is a current shot taken in early spring, I think. The shrub line, as was pointed out last night, is on the neighboring 1412 property, some of which overlaps onto my client's property, but would remain as that landscape buffer. The next slide, if you would bring that up, please, shows the addition in relation to that shrub line where we had removed that additional form which covered the linear stair. So all you're seeing is the matching slope of the office addition roof flattening out to keep the windows currently in the kitchen and those above on the other portion of that north wall. You can barely see the top of the canopy for the entry to the ADU unit. Would you please go to the next slide? I've now asked the illustrator to remove the shrub in Photoshop, and you can see the complete impact of the addition and the access to the ADU unit. I'd like to take a moment to describe the entry to that unit, which was a topic reviewed without our ability to comment thereafter last evening. The suggestion was made by one of the commission members that we could enter that unit, the ADU unit, at the rear of this existing building, and we can go back in a short moment to show you that location, and access the ADU unit at the same time we access the rear or use as an exit for my client, the owner. You cannot do that. You at minimum are required by the code to create a vestibule in that area to separate the two entries. And in this particular case, that staircase is 125 years old. It has no current standing with the code. You would have to add to its treads and risers, extend its size, and by adding the vestibule, you will cut the size of the existing kitchen and thereby the shop below. That is not workable. It's part of the reason we're here. We cannot do that and meet our needs to provide that office and continue the use of the shop. And that, I remind you again, was not created by the client here. It was existing. It's something we have to work with. I would like to add one more item to that particular position. Our obligation initially was to see the Preservation Commission. We did so. And I might add, I have quite a long history with both the downstate submissions of these forms of applications and the federal government and the local authorities, particularly in Oak Park, where I reside and my practice is. And basic respect is given, should be honored to any existing structure, let alone a landmarked project that was done by a recognized architect. In considering where we could put this addition and the access to the ADU unit, we could not do it in the front because of those same requirements. We could not do it in the rear. We could not do it in the demising wall separating the two units. We're only left with the north wall if, as I'll show you later, I have no alternative of where to put the office on the upper levels, since I cannot move the basement workshop from that location to any other level. So we were obligated to put the access, the entry door, contrary to the suggestion made last night, in the north wall. While we could have made the addition closer to the front, honored the existing setback, and maintained a 30-foot or more new rear yard, that would not be approved by the Historical Preservation Commission, because our obligation there is to respect the context of the home and not be contrary to that by moving that addition to the front. So, welcome to the complexity of meeting the dual set of requirements, if you will, the rock in the hard place of where to place these elements necessary for this person to maintain her work, which she'll speak to shortly, to do so without conflict with the residential uses of the home and the ADU unit in a secure location to keep her records separated from those areas. And again, at the same time, that part of this project being provided by her efforts physically, the restoration portions of doors, windows, interior trim, exterior trim, be accomplished because they can't be afforded, quite frankly, in the overall budget of the construction. The AD unit was submitted for approval in your permit department. It has been approved. We have not proceeded. It does not include the addition, obviously, because it has to come before you folks first. We have not proceeded because we wanted to get your review and consideration first. But it has been approved and is waiting only for the construction contractors to submit their licenses and bonds to be able to acquire the permit. I would like now to just review briefly, if I can, the standards by which we feel we have been obligated and have met. The first one is the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of the adjoining properties. We don't feel there will be any impact as a result of this project to the adjacent unit on the same site, which I might add, both are duplex units. They are two-unit buildings, but our obligation is to consider the entire site as one. So meeting your standards have required that the areas involved for the site, the building coverage, impervious soil, all have been related to the entire site. As I've mentioned, the landscape buffer would be maintained mostly on the neighbor's property, but also on our property. The use, we feel, has been contained in this lesser-sized addition at the rear. And as to value, I don't think it'll affect the value of the properties to the north, including the neighbor directly adjacent. I do feel it will increase the value of this property, including the adjacent owner to the south, because of the restoration of the overall building. Not necessarily because of the addition, but the restoration process. The second item is that the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. We're here seeking some relief. I think the points we've made, one of the existing conditions that the ownership did not create, and two, we have not spoken to, which is the practical considerations of undertaking a project of this type for a single person that must make it work. Yes, there will be a reasonable return on the ADU unit. It's part of the overall investment, but it also will be used to pay back for the over $200,000 improvements necessary for the property, being 125 years old, under electrical supplied, new mechanical systems required, plumbing systems to be updated, and underground sump and ejector pumps required to provide for that ADU unit. Two elements, therefore, I think make this point reasonable. The non-created existing site conditions and the practical requirements of paying for this work to be done on the building, part of which the restoration of those elements will be done by the client. The property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from the mere inconvenience of the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. Again, we make reference to the two elements, not creating the reason for being here on the site conditions and the practical requirement for making this project financially sustainable and a long-term commitment on her part. This is where she will stay, operate her job as a judicial reviewer, working for the state of Illinois, in-house within the building. Item 5 has a option, which I think the latter part of which, item B, refers to planned unit developments. This is not a planned unit development, it's of not such size. And unless that circumstances change, we are obligated to work under 5A. And that is an addition that has a cost that needs to be recovered by the ADU unit, by the restoration portion that this woman is providing for that part of the construction. Item 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having any interest in the property. I think I've covered that point sufficiently and be happy to answer any questions relative to it, but we've already maintained she did not create the site conditions. Item 7, the variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before the Land Use Commission issues its decision or recommendation to the City Council regarding said variation and request. If we hadn't pursued the exterior alternatives for the placement of this addition, or the interior alternatives of where to keep, or I'll even say place, the workshop, which is a necessary element in the process of completing the work, and the office space, you could say, let's move it up to the second, or the first, second, or attic level, okay? However, that conflicts with the residential portions and uses thereof, does not give a location outside of that traffic pattern, and will not allow the security and closure of that office to maintain the obligations of her responsibility at her job. All work is done on that job, in the home, would be in that office, and is not required to have clients or members of any part of the legal teams to visit. It's all done on video, it's recorded, and has to be secured in that location. If there are times when she has to meet with somebody, she goes to a state facility and location to do so. If I may then just briefly summarize our position. There are two items that I think we're offering for your consideration that we hopefully have met the test that this solution we've offered is minimal, is not at all been created by the occupant who wants to do the overall project. It's rather a practical need to find a way to do this construction for the overall improvements, the ADU unit, and more importantly, the restoration which will complete the project, which is not going to be done by contractors. That will be done, already started a year or more ago, on the window, doors, trim, interior and exterior, and shingle portions of the home. So, thank you for your patience and hearing our case. I'd be glad to take any questions if you'd like before you call for commentary from the neighbors.
Commissioner Westerberg.
So just to clarify, the ADU, as it's designed, has 2 bedrooms, correct?
Yes.
For a least invasive approach, could you consider making it a 1-bedroom ADU, and you could use that second rear bedroom as the office rather than having to build out? I sympathize with the peculiarities of the lot and historic preservation, but that is a rather unique house. It is what it is. And it would seem that your client could still get the benefit of the ADU as well as the office by simply reducing that size of that ADU. Was that considered at all?
Yes. We actually considered first floor, which there are historical restrictions at the state level and the local level of changing the arrangement of living, dining, vestibule, and to some degree, depending upon the situation, the kitchen. But also, we considered that location of the office, second floor and attic, setting aside the inconvenience of going up to those levels and somewhat inconvenient of taking your suggestion of going down and taking one of the bedrooms. that will impact two things. The stair going down there is currently just used by ownership. It is non-compliant with regard to treads, risers, headroom, and width, okay? To make it convenient to use, I would recommend that that stair be altered to accomplish it. That, again, still affects the the workshop area for size. And would you please go back to the basement floor plan? I'd like to illustrate one more point to the commissioner. Okay. Thank you. As you can see, Commissioner, right now, that stair turns to the north, okay? I would have to take space from that ADU unit, bring it around, and connect it somehow by adjusting the utility spaces and access to the bathroom by allowing an entry into that office area. I could not just have that turn the opposite direction to the south and access that area for an office use. If I did that, then I'd have to alternatively come around and create a way for her to get to the shop area.
So I'm sorry, you can't have, in other words, you come down to the landing at the bottom of that stair, you could have an entrance going into the workshop to the north, and then an entrance coming into that bedroom turned into an office to the south. And you would then close off, obviously, the hallway and utility space for the ADU. I'm just saying that there do seem to be some other options, perhaps, for the office without having to do the addition. I understand it wouldn't be easy. I totally understand that.
I would add just one more point, if I might, and that is that reducing the unit to one bedroom will alter the income. And that income is an integral part of that financial stability. It's not just, this person is not a developer. She's not doing this to complete the repairs, sell the unit, move on to the next project. This is a long-term project to provide for that financial stability, i.e., the income from 2 bedrooms to accomplish part of that.
Same issue, different line of questions.
Sure.
The ADU, no one has an issue with, I think, but the office I want to talk about. When you talk about the standards, how far? First of all, it seems like we talk a lot about the rear yard, but in fact, this office structure is in the side yard, correct?
The actual side yard is 5 feet, but yes, it is on or would be going onto the side of the building.
Right. Well, my question is, how far is this structure, this new structure, away from that north property line?
The required 5 feet.
It's 5 feet away.
Okay.
And what do the neighbors think of this, the neighbors to the north? You mentioned the people to the south, but it mostly affects the neighbors to the north.
Agreed. And my understanding of their commentary to date is they are against the addition. Mm-hmm. It's rental capability, it's access on the north side, and I'm sure they have other comments that I probably should.
And my
let them
last
provide.
question is just a clarification on the function of the office. The office is for the owner to entertain contractors? Entertain, wrong word, to have meet with contractors.
No, the office purpose is solely for her current and future job with the state of Illinois, which I will ask her to speak to for any specific questions you folks might have, but it's a judicial review position done on video audio within a closed space. There are no clients or other attorneys present, and it deals with child abuse, okay, and other conditions of that sort, which makes the security issue one to be
But this
considered.
is where this ties into Commissioner Westerberg's comment, because if public access is not required, then that what is the second bedroom could easily become the office. I originally thought that public access was required, but if that's not true, then that space could easily become the office, and then you wouldn't have the need for the additional structure.
If we didn't have the results that in both cases I've mentioned, less income to pay for these improvements, and the loss of space to create the increased stair requirements to meet the code, we can otherwise leave it because we're not touching it at this point, but have to treat it and increase the space at the loss of kitchen space and of basement space. Please understand, it's not simply change the treads and risers. The length of the area will increase substantially by at least 6 feet or more, and the width will increase by another foot. Frankly, it's 1.8 feet. So while you can say it's possible, yes, but the results are not equitable.
So sorry, there's nothing like having people pore over your plans and start drawing on them. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right, but that's what happened last night, and it got a little involved.
All right, understood. It's just, again, there does seem to be an option there. I agree it would be difficult. There might have to be some adjustments. There would have to be some adjustments. But it's an old house, and no matter what you do, there will be an impact. One last question, just as you're looking at this project in terms of the creation of the ADU, and you're working in the basement, what is the condition of the basement, especially as it abuts the neighbor in the duplex immediately to the south?
Okay. I would like to expand your question to include the construction period, whether or not the addition is the issue in this case. We have to protect not only ownership, but surrounding property, which would be to the north. It would also be to the west. There's a garage at that location off this property, and to the adjacent demising wall portion of 1400 Judson, the neighbor, if you will, to the south. So, first of all, insurance has to be very clear, and certificates offered to all those parties, direct certificates to protect their position from any sub or general contractor, number one. Number two, we have to isolate this project and establish certain access points on the parcel that are solely on my client's portion of the property, and restrict with fencing anything to the west, to the north, and on the demising wall. Take caution that all demolition, and in this particular case, is simply the HVAC system in the basement, which has to be removed and replaced elsewhere. The concrete slab put into this home would be a great example to show to current contractors, okay? It is in marvelous shape, as are the existing cast iron columns and steel beams that currently support the place. There is some effervescence on the exterior portion of the north wall and east wall. We're installing that underground water management system to a sump pump, which will require us to saw cut that slab in my client's basement, create work directly on the north side of this building, and also additional saw cutting in that basement to reach with the piping for the bathroom and the ejector pump. That's it for underground piping and changes. The structure we purposely have left alone, kept the columns, kept the beam, met the ceiling height requirements, and thereby minimize the structural element changes to this home or building. We don't want to alter it. There is no reason to do so on the rear wall. There is an existing exit steel balcony and stair with ladder condition on that west wall, which will be maintained. It was put there, I think, by a code requirement many years ago. I suspect it's probably within 15 to 20 or more years in existence. So, protection at a insurance level, protection at site level, and an understanding during the construction process to alert particularly the neighbor next door on the south of what noise will be like, and a telephone number offered, as we do in any of our projects, for either neighbor to north, west, or south to call for any problems that might occur. It is construction. There will be issues, but you have to manage that. The general contractor put in place, not the owner, to control that issue. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner.
Are there other questions from commissioners? I have just a couple. When was the home purchased by the current owner?
2016, sir.
Okay. And what is the overall square footage of the home? Rough estimate here. I'm not going to hold you to exact square footage, but
I need to refer to at least one item, if I might, please.
sure.
Thank you. I think if you use the area of the basement, which is approximately, if I'm not mistaken, around 1,300 square feet, it would be similar on the first floor, but diminish thereafter on the floor and certainly in the attic.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question, but
It does, and it kind of leads me into my next question, which
Sure.
is, what is the square footage that's proposed for the ADU?
it's under 1,000 square feet of that area in the basement area.
Okay.
I think that that would adjust the total to about 1,400 square feet, if I may, because that leaves room for that shop area in the northwest corner.
Okay. And when was the shop put in? Was that put in at the time of purchase, or is that a newer?
It's been used not only in that quadrant or area, it has been used in more areas of the basement because there's been no restriction except for the washer and dryer and the stair, if you will.
Okay,
There's a current bathroom down there, but it is non-functional.
all right. Okay, thank you. Other questions from commissioners? No. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to take some public testimony now.
Okay.
And I'll try to keep track of questions so that you can answer the questions if questions come up.
I almost forgot. I'd like to ask if the owner can make a brief statement.
Sure.
About her job site conditions and her position on the practicality of the project.
Sure. And if you could just please state your name and address for the record.
Of course. My name is Brooke Harper. I'm the owner of 1404 Judson. And let me just tell you a little bit about the work that I do and my circumstances that prompted the project we're trying to do. I'm an administrative law judge. So I conduct hearings in my home. I work almost exclusively from home and by video and telephone. So there's no meetings of, there was a little confusion, no contractors, nothing like that involved. Just me trying to do hearings that involve some sensitive subject matter and that have to be audio recorded. So you can't use white noise devices or anything like that to make sure that the sound is not coming or going from the space where you're doing them. So that's point number one. Point number two is that I'm a single person. I trying to stay in this house for the foreseeable future into retirement on a single income, not using, I don't have a second person to, it's not a dual income situation, and trying not to live as a hermit, so I do have housemates. And then thirdly, which Errol alluded to, I'm a woodworker. I have the ability to and have started to do restoration to the home. And that I want to continue to do that. I can't afford to have the type of work that I can do done by others. I need to be able to afford to do what I want to do with the home. I have to do those projects. The goals for the project are to try to develop an office space that will be better suited to the work that I do, that will be in a place where you won't have to worry about people coming and going outside the room, overhearing the proceedings, or having noises from the other parts of the house be overheard during the proceedings, and to have a workshop space that will let me continue to do the restoration that I've started on the house. I want to plan for the future with the reality of the situation, which is that I'm single and I'm going to stay in the house as a single person. I'm, like I said, going to do that with one income, not two, and I'll have housemates that help me do that. But as Errol mentioned, I need to develop a stream of income that will make it possible for me to retire in the house. One of the concerns of the ADU ordinance is to try to make it affordable for people who work in the public sector or who have a single income or who have a fixed income in retirement to stay in houses as the tax burden in Evanston increases and increases. And that is part of what we're trying to do with the planning for this project, is allow me to make a realistic plan for how this house can work for me in the long term. One of the questions that was asked about the ADU unit in terms of whether it could be made into a one-bedroom unit or keep it as a two-bedroom unit. So I'll leave to Errol the discussion of practicalities of that, but I will note that another motivating consideration, as I understood it, watching the ADU ordinance become adopted, was to try to increase the total stock of housing in Evanston that would be affordable, and add stock that would not just be luxury one-bedroom rentals and studios. There's a shortage in Evanston of two-bedroom apartment rentals. And that means that there are few places in Evanston, or increasingly fewer places in Evanston that you can rent to small families. And this, as planned, would be one of those, it would offer an option that is missing in Evanston. I'm just going to check and make sure there's nothing else important I need to cover. All right. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Harper, before you go away, I want to make sure if there's any questions from commissioners.
Sure, I just have one. Could you describe your office situation right now in the house?
Yes. Oh, yes, of course. So, and maybe it will be helpful too if I just sort of describe a little bit about, because you haven't seen the layout of the rest of the house. It's the main floor is a very open floor plan. The second floor has bedrooms oriented around a central hall. So it's a very nice use of the space in terms of efficiency, but there's no hallway where you could use a bedroom at the end of the hallway. So right now I'm using an office that it's right on that sort of central landing. So, where I have a housemate in the attic, I have one right now. In the past I've had two. There's always someone coming and going around that central access point on the second floor, and that would be true, I think, no matter where you tried to orient it around that point. And as Errol mentioned, we've been working with the Springfield Preservation Office on this project as well, and you can't make any changes to the main area, the first floor of the house, that would allow you to sort of enclose a space, and you can't make any changes to that main central vestibule on the second floor area. So, I've been making it work, but, when you live with other adults, you try to be respectful of the fact that people have lives and are going to come and go, and you can't expect people to sort of tiptoe around all day while you do your work. So that's the situation right now. I hope that answered your question.
Any other questions? If not, then, oh, sure. You can have a seat, Ms. Harper. Yeah.
Kate, I don't know if you can answer this, but we just got the report from last night's meeting on from the Historic Preservation Group, and they did not. Their final reading is not recommended, but I don't find a reason, a historic preservation reason for that in what I read. Could you give some clarity to the commission's opinion on this from a historical perspective?
Sure. My understanding, because I think it can be pretty nuanced and a little bit confusing, because they did approve the certificate of appropriateness that was 5-3. My understanding is that assumption that they made trying to react to what's proposed is that they assumed that these variations were approved when they're making that decision. And then they took issue with basically that increase in bulk for the building when they made the negative recommendation for the zoning.
From what perspective?
I think they talked about the building being overbuilt, not wanting increased bulk, and continually adding on, especially to that north elevation.
So their negative recommendation was on the zoning aspect only.
That's correct, and that was unanimous, 8-0.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let me count up real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I have 5 people signed up to speak on this matter, so I'm going to grant 3 minutes to each person. There's a little clock that you can watch your time, and I don't like it to beep because that's kind of annoying. But do try to pay attention to the time, and if you go over, I will also let you know. The first person I have signed up to speak, and forgive me if I mispronounce names, is Ann Trumpeter. Good job. Yours is one of the easy ones, though. That's
Thank you. I'm Ann Trompeter. I live at 1422 Judson, just 2 houses away from the property. My husband and I have been in our house for almost 35 years and have welcomed many modifications over the years to the beautiful historic buildings in our neighborhood. I feel that this project does not qualify as a hardship and therefore does not qualify for a variance, in my opinion. The existing house already has 5 bedrooms, and the entire footprint of the basement is available for additional living space or an ADU. As one of the architects on the Preservation Commission noted last night, the easiest solution for the owner is to use the existing rear stair, which can be adapted by adding a landing for both an entrance to the main house kitchen and to a potential ADU or apartment in the basement. There is no need to add anything onto the building as is being proposed. Also, if the current owner wants to make a space in her property for a private office for virtual meetings, she has adequate number of bedrooms to accomplish that without having to add additional square footage, and would also relieve the financial burden that the architect describes her as experiencing. It should also be noted that at last night's meeting, as you just noted here, there was not a single vote by any of the Preservation Commissioners to recommend zoning relief for this project, as they reiterated that there is no hardship, and in fact, the hardship is self-manufactured. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trumpeter. Any questions? No. Next up, I have Amanda Hartnett. These are some of the easier ones. I'm getting to more difficult ones later.
My name is Amanda Hartnett. I live at 1412 Judson, which is the property to the north. And I voice my objection to convert this 1404 building from a single-family home into a multi-unit building. I know the house well. The state of Illinois does not require its employees to build home additions to do their jobs. So this is not an economic necessity. It's not reasonable for neighbors to accommodate an addition when the owner has accommodated herself inside the house for years. This is also her second job. People do not stay at jobs, they change jobs. The building's already too large for the land and the density too great. Renting rooms on 2 floors, an ADU in the basement, and the proposed addition make the floor area ratio of this home completely out of proportion. This plan allows 6 more people on the property, but without limits on cars. There's no garage, driveway, or parking pad. There is a gangway at rear, but no outdoor space for tenants. Proposed entrances, additions, walkways, terraces shrink the small side yard even further and constitute an incursion on our side and a diminishing of our privacy. There are safety issues given that this becomes a public entrance and common use space for tenants, visitors, deliveries. When we did our kitchen renovation and house renovations, we sent windows off-site because stripping is very dangerous. This is the first I've heard tonight that there is going to be stripping of materials done next door. We sent it off-site for safety to preserve those windows. Preservation was clear last night that the landscaping issue can't be stated by the architect as a way to protect my property. If the owner changes jobs, the permanent addition can be rented out as a commercial structure to anyone. The next door is not just multi-unit, it's become nothing more than a vertical strip mall. There's no Rip Van Winkle here waking from asleep to find, surprise, guidelines. We all bought homes in this area knowing the requirements for land use, zoning, historic preservation. Those were in place to protect us, our neighbors, our greater community, and for those who come after us. There have been much smaller projects, less intrusive, less divisive projects within doors of us to which we did not object, but land use rejected those outright to uphold your guidelines. Information from the owner and architect has varied each time, witnessed tonight. This is akin to walking on a funhouse floor. Given the oops, no, what we really meant to say, the ever-shifting rationalization of this plan inspires no trust. There's no hardship, just her intention to expand renting rooms for secondary income. And now, tertiary income from the ADU at market rates. Before last night, there was no indication that the owner intended to make this affordable housing. On the contrary, when I asked that question in June, given Evanston's need for affordable housing and economic integration, I might add, the owner said to 4 of her neighbors she was doing this to make money. That, sadly, we do believe. Please do not approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Daniel Hartnett.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'm Daniel Hartnett. I reside at 1412 Judson, which is the building immediately to the north of the subject property. I object to the request for major variations to the zoning at 1404 Judson for 3 reasons. First, the requester hasn't made the showing that's required to meet the burden of proof under section 63812E. What the obligation is to provide you with evidence of meeting each one of those requirements. Instead, what you've gotten is conversation. The extraordinary unanimous finding last evening by the Preservation Commission makes that an even higher burden. Perhaps burden isn't the right word. Perhaps it's a mountain to climb. And I'm eliding the text here, but it's in the recommendation section. The Commission finds that the requested variations from the zoning ordinance are not materially related to nor being sought in the interest of historic conservation. Alternative locations for the proposed use in existing interior spaces that would not necessitate variations were deliberated and were deemed viable. These alternatives would maintain the integrity of the proposed structure and its north elevation. Second, as Amanda has mentioned, all of us who took title to a landmark single-family residence in a historic district are on notice of the duties, including those that relate to building lot coverage, that we owe to the citizens of Evanston, to our neighbors, and to the building itself. The zoning ordinance isn't the source of any claimed hardship, as Mr. Sterling reported when he stated the Planning Department's recommendation that's in your packet in his memorandum of August 29 at page 5. He said, the alleged hardship and practical difficulty appears self-created, renting interior space and converting the basement into habitable space, both of which could otherwise be utilized for an office. Third, there's no benefit to the public from the proposed variance. A commissioner put the question, what do the neighbors to the north think? This neighbor to the north thinks that the addition, which you've seen in the third illustration that was presented, is an architectural atrocity in a landmark single-family residence. In sum, the correct ruling here is for the Land Use Commission to deny the variations requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Nancy Liskar.
Good evening. I am Nancy Lisker. For 23 years, my husband and I have owned half of the double house, 1400 Judson. I wish to go on record as opposing the granting of zoning relief for the office addition project at that address. I spoke in detail last night before the Historic Preservation Commission about the reasons for my opposition, most of which have been outlined by others here tonight. In short, I stated, 1, that the proposed office addition would blemish the exterior of a landmark Evanston home designed by an important architect, and 2, the applicant's desire for secure office space within her home could be met elsewhere within the home. As you know, the commission last night voted unanimously to recommend that the Land Use Commission not grant the variances. Tonight, I'd like to express some concerns about the proposed construction of multiple rental spaces inside the existing structure at 1404 Judson. Although to my knowledge, construction of the proposed ADU and rooms for rent have not raised any red flags for this commission, I do find myself wondering whether there are in fact zoning issues that apply. The block and the neighborhood consist almost exclusively of single-family homes. Don't we, the immediate neighbors, have a say in whether a neighbor is allowed to triple the number of persons living in the home and to reduce the amount of parking available to all who don't own garages? To increase noise, traffic, litter, garbage? And while all the residents of the 1400 block of Judson and the 400 block of Greenwood will likely be affected in some way by the increased density this project would bring, why is there no protection, particularly for us, the neighbors in the attached home, who share the parcel of land, the foundation, the roof, a set of walls? Ms. Harper told us herself that this project would take years to complete. What about the long-term noise, inconvenience, and hazards of construction, both to ourselves and to our property? And over the medium and long term, what happens to the valuation of the property when the attached house morphs from a single-family home to what amounts to a 6 or 7 occupant rooming house? My husband and I are an artist and an editor. We never dreamed we could live in a neighborhood so extraordinary. When we moved here in 2000, it felt like we'd won the lottery. But for the first time in 23 years, we are lying awake at night worrying and wondering whether we'll need to move out. Thank you.
Thank you. The next up, I have Bruce Styler. And he's the last person I have signed up to speak. Did I miss anyone on this case? Seeing no hands.
Good evening. I am Bruce Styler, living at 1400 Judson, happily for 23 years. I was surprised last night when the certificate of appropriateness was granted. The deliberation centered around construction standards with nary a glance at the effect of the proposed addition upon the Hunt's design or the integrity of our neighborhood. These issues were the bulk of the comments made by the 5 people who spoke in opposition to the approval. This is a wonderful building which Hunt designed with careful attention to massing, placement of elements, and consistency. Oh, sorry. Oh. There goes another minute. Consistency of approach throughout. Suddenly, a low appendage in the form of this addition is stuck upon its side, significantly altering the experience the whole provides. None of Hunt's 30 homes has been altered. Approval of this application would set a dangerous precedent for the future. We're a neighborhood zoned for single-family homes with the addition of an ADU together with 3 rooms for rent in the home itself. It results in the possibility of 8 or more people occupying this building, making it more like a rooming house. I know Ms. Harper desires a private, secure office with which to conduct her business. As I noticed when I looked at the revised plans, and as Mr. Cohn noted last night, there is a space in the basement next to the ADU, virtually identical in size to the proposed addition. Now I'm actually winging it because the revised plan does not identify this space as a workshop, rather as an empty space. It leads to confusion as to its usefulness, and it would have been good to know that last night. I think the loss of income from reducing the ADU to 1 bedroom would be offset by not constructing the addition. The other alternative for Ms. Harper would be to rent an office space. I know quiet and privacy is an issue, but I also know plenty of psychologists, psychotherapists, and psychiatrists who successfully conduct their practices in office buildings. I implore you to reject this proposal, both for the integrity of the home and of our neighborhood. Thanks for your time. and
Thank you.
attention.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kirsch, we're back to you. If there's anything you would like to say in summation, anything you would like to respond to that you heard from the neighbors before we go into deliberation.
Okay, thank you. The first comments were made by Amanda, I believe, and she pointed to, again, the issue that was raised last night of the alternative entry. It does not work at the rear of the building without extensive alterations to the stair and the loss of space in the kitchen and in the basement area of the shop area. The second person, Amanda, I think, Hartnett, I believe is concerned about the increased density, the traffic, and contrary to the last person's concern for 8 people, the maximum would be 6, if that, okay? The AD unit would allow for 3, and the upper floor, the occupant, my client, and 2 others only. That's a total of 6. On that same commentary of that last person, Bruce, renting another office space increases the requirement for time and use of that time to get to and from that space, moving all the equipment for the audio-visual requirements. Yes, security can be provided. Yes, noise would be contained. But by the same token, why not spend that on the improvements that allow you to accomplish the overall project? The renovation, the restoration, the repairs, and do it in the same location. I'll leave Mr. Daniel Hartnett to his opinion of the architecture. However, it was reviewed, and our changes, which Amanda, his wife, commented on, were requested by the commission. Therefore, we responded with those changes. We have maintained only the original and those changes, again, requested by that commission. I believe the subject of the ADU unit, as raised by Nancy, has been debated for a good deal of time. I'm not sure if it came before this commission before it was accepted, but it has been adopted. It is considered a requirement to assist in the housing stock in this community. That's not something my client created, is taking advantage of, or has provided a request to you for. It's something that exists. It's a matter of law, not a matter of selection. Do you have any further questions of me?
I believe so. So thank
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
At this point, we will close the public testimony, and we will go into deliberation. During this period of time, the commissioners will debate the pros and cons and render our decision. So I'm going to ask for general thoughts from the commission. Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, let me start out by saying that I spent some time on the Historical Preservation Commission. One of the things about landmark buildings and their historical significance is not just the building, but it's the space around the building. And I think that's just as important as the building itself. When I went out to visit this property today, I frankly, I looked at it and I went around the block and I looked at it again. And it's hard for me to imagine an addition on the north side of this building, given the space that's there. So I think it's just too much. But I have several reasons for not recommending this. I think there are other solutions, which we've talked about some of them. I don't think they're impossible. I'm an architect also, and although I haven't studied the plans, I think there's potential there. I don't think that there's a real hardship there. I just don't. And also, and then my last point, I guess, is on this ADU. I remember approving ADUs, but didn't they come with parking requirements and other things that may not exist here? No? Okay, wrong about that. But for the other reasons, I'm not in favor of the project.
I know there was discussion about parking with the ADUs, but the final one did not include any parking. Commissioner Westerberg?
I think, yes, unfortunately, I think the biggest issue for me is that this design of the addition doesn't represent the least deviation to make the improvement. I think there are other options, as we talked about. I am sympathetic to the ordeals of trying to make a historic house livable and usable for modern standards, but I think that's also, unfortunately, one of the challenges you take with an older house, especially a landmarked house. I like the idea of the ADU. I think it's well designed. I think if it were smaller, you could use some of that space, however, in a way that would mean you would not need the addition. So that's my response.
Commissioner Lindwall?
Sure. I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think I am supportive of the ADU, and frankly, that's not something that we're being asked to consider. However, I think I kind of just have a question for staff with respect to the portico, the covered entryway. Is that something that can be approved as a minor variation, or is that, what's the status of that? I mean, I'm troubled by the office addition.
Yeah, I've reviewed that with the applicant. It appears to me that would be at about the 20-foot area, which would trigger a minor variation, and then it would also be a minor variation for building lot coverage as well.
Okay, and that wouldn't necessarily have to, I don't remember if those come back to us or not.
No, it's a determination by the zoning administrator.
Okay, thank you.
The only way it would come back to us would be if it were appealed. We would hear an appeal on it. Commissioner Patel?
I'm in favor of the project. I think just trying to focus on the zoning issues specifically, I feel like the requests are very modest, and I like the idea of being pro ADU. That's all I have to say.
Anything from you, Commissioner Marichuk?
I will join my colleagues on the other side of this table. I was not convinced that this is the only option for the remodeling, so that both an ADU and an office, I believe they could be available in a different way without the addition. The addition is obviously a problem, so I'm not in favor.
Thank you. My general thoughts are, first off, the addition, I don't mind the addition. I don't think it looks bad aesthetically. I think it fits into the house. I think going to some of what Commissioner Halleck said and looking at the space around the house, what we often find is that this was probably not the original lot. The original lot was much larger, so I think some of that has already been lost to it. But where I'm having the big problem is I think this is about choices. This is a large house. There are many opportunities within this house to do things. And in my opinion, we're trying to do too much and creating a situation in which a choices have to be made about whether there's office space, an ADU, additional rentable space given to housemates, and whether or not, when this house was purchased in 2016, whether all of this was considered. There are problems, as you mentioned, in dealing with historic houses. It becomes more problematic when you move beyond the houses that are just landmarked by the city, but when you get into anything that's state, federal, et cetera, because a whole additional layering of restrictions, regulations, guidelines come into place. So my general thinking on this is that I think there's just too many things that are trying to be planned for this one property. So I don't think I can support it. But before we make our vote, we do have to look at the standards. Mr. Kirsch did allude to these earlier. There are a set of standards that we must find are met, and I think Ms. Jones is bringing those up on the thing. But these standards, there are 7 of them for a variation, which is what we have, and I will be going through those, and I invite commissioners to interject where necessary. The requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. Whereas I do think that the plan that has been presented to us does fit in well, as well as it can with a 125-year-old home. And I don't believe that it necessarily encroaches upon the neighbors to the north. We still are observing the 5-foot setback. I don't believe that this would have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, and property values of the adjoining properties, but I know some other people may disagree with me on that one, so I believe that standard is met, though. The requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance in and of itself, and I'm excluding the preservation ordinance at this point because that's a totally different commission. They get to kind of weigh in on us, we don't weigh in on them. But the intent of the zoning ordinance is to allow people to adapt their homes over time. A home that was built 125 years ago may not meet the needs of somebody living in it today. So I believe the zoning ordinance does allow for that adaptation over time. And so I believe that that standard is met. Number 3, the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. Again, I find this one to be met. This, as I mentioned before, is probably not the original lot that the house sat on. It was probably a much larger lot at the time Mr. Hunt designed and built this property, or I don't know if he did the actual building, but when he designed the property. And as Commissioner Halleck said, quite often that is taken into consideration with the surrounding area around that particular home. By the fact that over the years this has been subdivided and the neighborhood has changed drastically, I think by reducing the overall amount of the property, it does make it difficult to build on. When you have almost a 0-foot rear lot line, I mean, it's 3 feet or something like that, it does make it difficult to make any improvements on the property. So I believe there is a peculiar hardship and difficulty to this particular property. Number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. This one is one that I don't believe is met. I believe that we have looked at the property itself and where we didn't go into great detail about the inside. This does seem to be a large older home. It does seem to have a very large basement area. And so I believe that things could be fit into this home to meet many of the needs that the homeowner is looking for, and so that this standard I don't believe is met. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property, or if additional income is being sought, there is a public benefit that is being provided. And I'm paraphrasing that last part a little bit. We've heard over and over again that this really does need to be an income source through the ADU in order to allow this particular homeowner, in order to do the preservation that she wishes to do on the property, and for her to continue to be able to live in this home. This one's a little tricky for me because I don't see a particular public benefit. I mean, there is a benefit, obviously, for our preservation. Mr. Sterling may argue that that is a public benefit at some level. But I believe that we've heard lots of testimony that this really is about trying to create income so that work can be done on the home.
I think the other potential positive is the creation of the ADU, which again, even if it ends up being market rate, it still is expanding our housing supply.
Yes. Although I will note for the record that we are not really looking at the ADU on its own tonight. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. I believe that many of the site plan issues that this particular owner is working with were not created by her. Obviously, as I mentioned before, this was probably a much larger lot at one time. I don't believe that it was designed to have a 3-foot rear yard. But as properties were divided up, et cetera, we've created a very small site here for this. I think where this comes into play is, again, going back to my discussion a little earlier about making decisions on how to use the property that you have. And so I think that the hardship is being created because there's so much already happening within the house. That's why an addition is being sought. So I don't believe that this standard has been met. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulations among the feasible options identified before the Land Use Commission issues its decision. Again, going back to some of the other things we've said, the minimal change really comes down to, I think, in the opinion of many of the commissioners, of no change. And trying to adapt the space within the home to meet the needs of the homeowner while also maintaining the preservation and the integrity of the neighborhood. So those are my findings on fact. Is there anybody who would like to add anything or disagree with me on any of those? Hearing none, I will ask if there is a motion for 1404 Judson Avenue, 23 ZMJV 0041.
Okay. Actually, no, I don't want to do it that way. I'll move with respect to 1404 Judson Avenue, the major variation 23 ZMJV-0041, requesting, I think it's just the building lot coverage of 33.25%, where 30% is the maximum permitted. And the proposed rear yard setback of 3.75 feet, where 30 is the minimum, be approved. We want a positive recommendation, so, or positive motion.
And are you putting any conditions on that?
I think that the one condition would be that the entrance to the ADU, the minor variation that may be required for that, be accepted. Except that we're going to vote.
We can't accept that. So
No.
that's a major a minor variation that we
yes,
decided by the zoning
so no, I don't
administrator.
have
So
any other
there's
conditions.
Okay, I heard you discussing conditions, so I didn't
No.
know what they were. All right,
No.
thank you. So it's been moved for approval of the requested zoning relief. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Puchtel. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please, Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Halleck? No. Commissioner Linwall,
No?
Commissioner Woodinchev,
No.
Commissioner Pocatello,
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
No.
Chair Rogers.
No. So with 5 votes against and 1 vote in favor, the motion does fail, and the proposal is not approved. So you can speak with staff if you'd like to look at some other options available to you, but at this time, the answer is no from this commission. So thank you. All right, we have our second case for this evening, which is 1041 Ridge Court. I don't know who's handling this. Is this you again, Mr. Sterling? Boy, you just don't show up, and then you just want to do them all. Let me have him read it into the record, and then I'll speak with you.
1041 Ridge Court, 23 ZMJV 0055. Mark Dembski, architect and applicant on behalf of the property owner, requests the following major zoning variations to construct a 2-story addition to the home's northeast volume. A rear yard setback of 6 feet where 30 feet is required, Code Section 6828A4, and building lot coverage of 34.5% where 30% is the maximum permitted, Code Section 6827. The Land Use Commission is the determining body for the proposed zoning relief in accordance with Code Section 2194E.
Thank you. I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us on this matter, which is 1041 Ridge Court, be sworn by raising your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you. And if you'd please state your name and address for the record.
Mark Dembski, 113 Dartmouth Court, Glenview, Illinois, 60026.
Thank you, Mr. Dembski. And if you'd please tell us about the project.
Yeah, so 1041 Ridge Court, probably the best way to show it, can we get to the diagram that shows the buildable area? So it's on the corner of Greenleaf Street and Ridge Court. Yeah, that diagram there, great. So it's an interesting shaped lot. So it's a trapezoid, happens to be on the corner, as we said. So looking at the buildable area, that's shown in the gray shaded rectangle. So being a 7,500 square foot lot in an R1 district, it is in the Ridge Historic District. It is not contributing historically, the house in particular, but it is within the historic district. The building, it's a 1-story 1950s ranch that is existing non-conforming. That gray rectangle, that's the buildable area, is 1,415 square feet. So it's obviously under what would be allowed on a similar sized lot in that zoning district. So non-conforming, there's a 30, because Greenleaf is not considered, even though it's the narrowest, if we looked at it really from the narrowest part of the property and Greenleaf were the front, then this would be a side yard. But as Ridge Court is the front of is considered the front yard, then the rear yard is 30 feet, which you can see the building is already at 24 feet 9 inches. At its tightest point, it does eventually get within that setback where the garage is to the south. And then from the front yard, it's a 27-foot required setback, which already the front of the house is over that setback as well. It does conform on the Greenleaf side. It does conform on the alley to the south, the 5-foot that's required there. So we looked at, so Howard and Amy Hartenstein have lived in the house for 22 years. Amy is here tonight as well with her daughter, if there's any questions for her. But since it's an 1,869 square foot house, they decided that after 22 years, they'd like to add on to it. So we looked at a couple of options. To do a minor variation would be really to, put a second floor on the home and go straight up. It would be still non-conforming as far as setbacks, but we wouldn't require any lot coverage variation. It currently is about 25% lot coverage, where 30% is required. I believe we're asking for 34%. Somewhere in that neighborhood. As far as total impervious, even with the addition that we're requesting in patio, it would be under the 45% that would be allowed for impervious. But we did look at an option of going straight up from an historic and from just the character of the building. which is what we explained to the Preservation Commission last night, and they tended to agree. If we could go to maybe some of the, let's go to the roof plan first, 2 down. So, well, we'll stop there, I'm sorry. So that's the proposed addition that we're asking for. So it's adding a bedroom, family room, and kitchen on the ground floor. And then above it, tucked into the addition that's kind of in a partial second story, would be another bedroom. So if we did put it all on the second floor, it wouldn't really work for the kitchen portion of that or the family room. So from a functional standpoint, we really wouldn't want to put it all on the second floor anyway, but we think it's not in keeping with the character of the home. If we can go to the next slide. So this shows the existing roof is in the lower right and what we're proposing with the addition. So the idea is to continue the roof that starts from the west and move the ridge line basically as we move up and keep everything that's being built east of the existing ridge. So essentially from the front of the house, other than the covered canopy that we want to put over the front porch, the house would remain unchanged. You would notice obviously the additions from the Greenleaf side or from the rear of the building. If we can go to the next slide. So those are the floor plans just showing the kitchen bedroom addition on the first floor and then the bedroom addition on the proposed second floor and how that works with the existing roof. Next slide, please. These are photos of the existing home. So again, it's a modest mid-century ranch home, masonry. The gable ends are an 8-inch wood lap siding. These are the neighbors. So this is Greenleaf to the east. You can see it's a much larger home, and then there's a garage that basically abuts the property, the subject property at 1041 Ridge Court. And then on the lower part is the neighbor that's south of the property. So there's a drive there next to their garage, and then a home, again, a larger scale 2-story home that's to the south. Here is what streetscape that we're proposing. So this is showing the additions. To the left, again, just sort of increasing the slope of the roof back in order to accommodate everything in the backyard. That's the house to the south. And then on Greenleaf, that's the house to the east. You can see the garage is roughly the scale of the existing home that we're talking about here. This shows the existing front elevation and the proposed on top. So again, taking the roof back, increasing the height of the chimney in order to work with that increased ridge line, and then showing the proposed front porch canopy as well. Next slide, please. It's a view of it from Ridge Court looking back. We're trying to be very respectful of what's going on with the home and make it more or less inconspicuous that most of what happens would be in the backyard. Next slide, please. That's the canopy. We can just go to the next slide. So this would be the Greenleaf elevation. We're mimicking the gables, and in fact, the portion that projects into the backyard, that is really the dimension and scale of the width of the house turned 90 degrees to create that. It's pushed back. We're using some materials and then adding that second floor. Again, that's pushed back. So everything reads as a 1-story gutter, essentially, from the street. It's a 3/4 view of it, existing and proposed. Again, now from the east, looking back. Continue on, please. And then rear elevation of the home existing and what is proposed. 3/4 view. And then from that driveway of the neighbor to the south, this is what you'd see with the addition. So in looking at, if we go to the next slide, to look at what a minor variation would be. I guess we don't have those. Oh, we didn't show those graphics in there, right? Yeah. So again, in in looking at it as a minor variation, it would be putting a two-story addition on the top, which really doesn't work with the character of the home. And we feel pretty strongly about, one, its scale and the way that it's built, and Howard and Amy aren't really interested in making it, you know, a two-story box, if you will. And with the function that's required or requested for the kitchen in particular, we'd want to do it on the ground floor. So I'm not sure if there's any other graphics to look at there other than, as you can see, it's a difficult site. We really couldn't touch the ground anywhere on it without really needing a variation of some sort. And we think it's for the benefit of the home as well as for the historic district there, not to just put a two-story addition on the top.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Halleck?
Just one. What did you say was the reason behind the this proposal? Why enlarge the house?
I'm sorry?
Why enlarge the house?
Oh, because they really need more space. It's only 1,800 square feet.
I see.
And they've lived in it for 22 years, and it's cozy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it gives them a better kitchen. It gives them another bedroom on the ground floor. It gives them another bedroom on the second floor. So, yeah, if you'd like to hear from the owner, she'd be happy to address that.
You mentioned that trying to make it a two-story would not be really in keeping with the contemporary ranch. Could you do a story and a half, and would that give you much?
It kind of is a story and a half because we brought the roof line down with the dormer. So it's not a full two, or you're talking to do it, yeah. I don't want to say that we couldn't. What it really does, though, is it eliminates, the kitchen is really a very tight galley kitchen there. That's one of the main drivers of the whole project, really, is to kind of expand that kitchen. So if it were to become a totally second floor project, I'm not sure that the owners would pursue it at all, quite honestly. Okay. But could it be shaped a little bit differently and not just look like a two-story box? Yes. I won't lie and say that that's impossible, but yeah. I think, looking at it, it kind of performs like a side yard setback if you really look at the Greenleaf elevation. I know it's a rear yard setback, but point of fact, there, like the garage of the house next door is really within that very tight setback too, and this isn't really doing anything. It's not behaving any differently than other buildings are there, but it is different because it's a corner lot, so.
I have a question about windows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing a lot of solid wall in the elevations.
It's not unlike the pattern of the windows that are there, quite honestly. I mean, we were very meticulous about keeping where the bedroom windows would make sense and the spacing of the windows. Like if we look at the Greenleaf side, we've done that. You can see on that elevation there where we've got the windows that are spaced exactly like the ones that are in the current home that are in two separate bedrooms. That's in one bedroom that's in the back.
Yeah, to me, for some reason, when I'm looking at the drawings, it feels very bulky. And I was thinking maybe that is the windows or something like that is creating that bulk. And I think part of it is because of the gables that you have that don't have windows, obviously, because it's not livable space, I'm guessing, for the most part.
Right.
And so that was just something that struck me, was that through some of the elevations, it felt very bulky. Not from the Ridge Court side. I do like the picking up the roof line of the existing house to go up to the second story or half story or whatever we're calling it. But particularly from the Greenleaf side, it just felt very bulky to me.
Yeah, keep in mind too that second gable is pushed considerably back from the first gable too. So,
all right. Other questions from commissioners? I'm not seeing any. I noticed staff had raised their hand when I asked for people to be sworn. Were you being sworn for a particular reason, or were you just liking to be sworn tonight? Okay. All right. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to us on this matter for 1041 Ridge Court? Seeing no one, oh, I see a hand go up and back. Sure, yes, please, come up. And go ahead and give us your name, please.
Yes, my full name is Amina DeMarco, and I live at 1041 Ridge Court. I just wanted to address the question that Mr. Halleck had asked. Thank you for that question. So we have 3 children. When we moved into the house, my daughter Molly was just born. She's now 22. And the bedroom, the 3rd bedroom is actually really small. It's 9 by 10. So we had our 3rd child and we were kind of busting at that point. But we managed to kind of just roll with it. And we absolutely love the neighborhood. And I love the house. I grew up in a ranch and just love a brick ranch. But pre-pandemic, we took in my nephew. So that made us 4 kids and then us 2 adults. And we actually did really look to see move, get a bigger space, kind of expand. And really, I've been looking for 5 or 6 years and just couldn't find anything that was as wonderful as our neighborhood or didn't, the house and something we could afford. And so that's really one of the reasons. In addition to that, both my mother, who is widowed and lives in Scabbenston, is aging. She's in her mid-70s, and my mother-in-law, who's also widowed and just in her early 80s. One of the other reasons why we wanted to do this was that we're hoping at some point they'll probably come and live with us. And the beauty of a ranch is having that first floor, keeping those bedrooms, being able to have guests stay, and adding the bedroom upstairs, having a little bedroom suite for a child or for myself and my husband kind of really fit the bill for where we think our life is going in the next 5 to 10 years. And, we want to stay in Evanston. We love the town. My husband grew up here. We're hoping our kids will come back here. So this is kind of like our forever home. So thank you for, thank you for hearing our request.
Thank you, Ms. DeMarco. Not hearing anyone else, is there anything that you would like to say in summation, Mr. Dembski?
I don't think I need to summarize anything more than what's been said. Yeah.
All right, thank you. With that, we will go ahead and close the public testimony of 1041 Ridge Court and begin our deliberations. I'll ask for general thoughts from the commission.
I think that ranches are going to become more and more popular because of the aging baby boomers. Just my thought. So I understand the point of the in-laws and all that. This is a really tough site, I think, and I personally think that the solution is excellent. This is one of those situations where zoning allows something which wouldn't be as good as the solution, I think, the solution that you proposed. You could go up straight up, but that wouldn't be as good as the scheme. I like the massing. I don't think it's because of the setbacks and the slopes. I think it's very interesting. I'm in favor of the project.
Other thoughts from commissioners? Commissioner Ramshoff?
I'm in favor of the project for sure. It's a good solution. The only wish I'm following up Chair Rogers, if you can think a little bit more about details, details around the windows, details at the front, and the coloration. Maybe there are better solution for that. You will repaint everything, obviously. So think about this. Even a small skylight over the big roof will bring some life to the roof. So think about details. I believe it will be better if you put some effort to make it more beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fuchschild?
Yeah, I'm for the project. I think it's a challenging site, and the variations being requested are very modest, and I like the solution.
All right. Don't feel you have to say something if you don't have anything to add. I'm not going down the row. As before, we do have a set of standards that we must find are met, and I will walk through those standards and again ask commissioners if they disagree or want to add something to any of my thoughts, feel free to do so. Again, the first one is the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. Whereas I did mention the mass of the property, I feel that the neighbors that would be most directly impacted probably do not have the greatest impact of that mass being put on them. For example, if it had been moved to the other side of the rear yard, kind of putting it up against that other house would have created, I think, a greater problem. I think some of the things that Commissioner Miranchov had suggested, kind of piggybacking on what I had talked about, might be in consideration moving forward, just to make it a little more welcoming and not feel quite as quite so large when you look at it certain ways. Number two, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. Again, we ask that people come to us and request variations all the time to improve their properties, to make them fit better into modern lifestyles. The one thing that I will bemoan a little bit here is quite often we see homes like this that are kind of our starter homes being adapted into something that are larger, and depleting somewhat on our starter home stock in the city of Evanston. We see it happen more frequently than not based on market conditions, things like that. The homeowner did mention they'd been looking for, I think, 5 or 6 years at trying to find something that better fit their needs and weren't able to find it. So that's my only thought on that, but I do believe that it is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. Number three, the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. We saw the trapezoid that was drawn that is this property, and trying to build something on it once the house has already been constructed at an angle different than the front yard and rear yard creates a whole host of issues. We've seen this on a number of properties where, especially on our angled streets, we see oddities occur. So that standard, I believe, is met. The property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were carried out. Obviously, their house is already a non-conforming home. It already encroaches upon the rear yard and the front yard, as well as, I believe, the one side yard. I don't remember the exact measurements on the side opposite Greenleaf. Is that compliant? Okay. It's hard to tell from the drawing sometimes. But obviously, by building something that would be a second story on top of that doesn't necessarily create any zoning relief that you aren't seeking now. It's just the overall intent, the overall impact of the zoning relief that's being sought. Number five, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property, or if additional income is sought, there's a public benefit. We heard that this is a growing family, that there's a potential that some of the older members of the family, a mother and a mother-in-law, I believe, were mentioned, may be moving into this. So there's no additional income that's being sought. It's really trying to build a property that meets the needs of a growing family. Number six, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. I believe the homeowner mentioned they purchased somewhere around 2000, 2001. They said they'd been in the property for 22 years. Obviously, this lot and the oddity of it being a trapezoid with a home already existing on it was not created by them, so that standard is met. And finally, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified. We've had some discussion about the adding of a second story on top. which was another option that was considered. But I think when we look at the overall impact of this particular property on the adjoining properties, adding a second story on top actually would have a greater impact on the surrounding neighbors. And so therefore, I believe that standard is also met. Is everyone in agreement with my finding of standards? With that, I will ask if there is a motion in regard to 1041 Ridge Court.
Sure. I move approval of the request for major variations for the building lot coverage and the rear yard setback with respect to 1041 Ridge Court, 23 ZMJV-0055.
Second.
Been moved by Lindwall, seconded by Pocatello. Sorry, my microphone is not on. Moved by Lindwall, seconded by Pocatello. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll, Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mudenshev?
Yes.
Commissioner Pocatello?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes. So with 6 in favor and 0 against, the motion does carry, and the approval, or the requested zoning relief is approved. And you can work with staff on what the next steps will be on moving forward with your project, and good luck with your project. Thank you. We're going to take about a 5-minute recess just for everyone up here to sort of stretch their legs, go to the bathroom if they need to. It's 9:09. We'll come back at 9:15. We are at the third and final case for this evening, which is a plan development and a zoning map amendment for 504 514 South Boulevard, 23 PLND 0027. Are you this again, Mr. Sterling? Boy, you're just doing them all tonight, aren't you? Yep. All right. Please read it into the record for us.
504 to 514 South Boulevard, 23 PLND 0027. Eugene Hugh requests a special use for a plan development and a concurrent zoning map amendment on behalf of Pearl Developers LLC to rezone from the existing R4 General Residential Zoning District to the R5 General Residential Zoning District and construct a 60-unit mixed-income housing development. The applicant is requesting the following site development allowances: an east street side yard setback of 5 feet where 15 feet is required, a west interior side yard setback of 6 feet 2 inches where 15 feet is required, an impervious surface ratio of 85% where 75% is the maximum permitted, building height of 62 feet where the lesser of 5 stories or 50 feet is the maximum permitted, no dedicated off-street loading berth where 1 short loading berth is required, and a 25% density increase for a total of 60 units. The Land Use Commission is the recommending body for this case in accordance with Section 6358 of the Evanston Zoning Code and Ordinance 92-021.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us on this matter to raise their right hand and be sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
Yes.
Thank you. At this point, I will ask the applicant to come forward. And if you'd please state your name and address for the record.
Joanna Casanova, Pearl Developers, 800 West St. Clair, Cleveland, Ohio.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, too.
Tiffany Ackerman with Hooker DeYoung Architects, live in 2120 East Swanson, Muskegon, Michigan.
All right, thank you. If you'd please tell us about your proposal.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for having us this evening. We'll go through a couple slides, if that's okay. South Boulevard Shores is a proposed development at 504 514 South Boulevard. You're probably familiar with the property. We're very excited to be here this evening. We actually started the process back in 2021 in response to an RFP issued by the city of Evanston. We were able to assemble a team that ultimately was awarded the project for the development. The current site is owned by the Housing Authority of Cook County with an agreement with HOT, and a portion is a city-owned property. The team that we have assembled include Pearl. We are a national developer, owner, and contractor. We do mixed income. Affordable housing is our expertise, but we also do market rate development. We are in the projects long term and have had many government partnerships and also housing authorities. As a general contractor now here this evening is a partnership of Leopardo and Pearl. We also a construction company. And then as architect of record, we have here Tiffany with Hooker Dion. We are proposing a net zero development with great green standards, and our consultant for energy is Database DBHMS, not here with us this evening. The proposal was in response of increasing affordability in the city of Evanston. We are proposing 60 new construction, high quality, affordable family residences, meaning we have 1 through 3 bedroom included in our development. Total of 60 apartments with a breakdown of 18 3 bedrooms, 12 2 bedrooms, and 31 bedrooms. We are proposing 65 parking spaces, and as a requirement of the city, we are reserving 20 of the 65 spaces as, for future leasing to the city. Currently, the site has been used as a public parking by the city, and they wanted to make sure they preserve that option for the residents in Evanston. The architect will speak a little bit more about the design intent, but our goal was to integrate within the community and make it look like a walk-up style instead of a straightforward first-story development. We tried to create a little bit of a townhome look in the front end against South Boulevard Shores. Obviously, we're very excited about using this underutilized parking lot and increasing affordable and opportunities in Evanston. And we are very committed to the sustainable design to meet the city's climate ordinance, and also we are trying to achieve net zero certification. So the whole design intent here is having in mind net zero goals. All right, I'll leave it now with Tiffany.
Thank you. So the design is proposed five stories, about 62,000 square feet total throughout the building. In the design, we looked at doing a cascading effect so that you can kind of step back a little bit as you go up. And that was in reaction to the neighboring areas, kind of a transition point between the commercial district and the residential district going down Boulevard there. In the front along South Boulevard, we show we have some walk-up units and townhome style units where you can actually access your unit from that South Boulevard as well as within the interior corridor. So they have two entrances to their apartment. Along South Boulevard, we're proposing an open style green space. We have a little bit more space there where you can see we're proposing some open space for common area seating. And then up on the rooftop of the 4th floor there, we have some for residential use, some outdoor and indoor children and community space for the residents. The TOD allows for she went through the parking there. We have 20 spaces along with her 65 total. And then the roof design, along with the energy efficiency, we're moving towards trying to get solar on the roof as well. And that solar, we will place those PV panels on the roof. Let's see. So this diagram here shows us the circulation path throughout the site in neighboring areas. The red dashed lines that you see are sidewalks, both existing and proposed. The proposed red lines are on the site that you see going north-south. They're east of the orange building. Those are the new ones. And then we show two-way traffic going through, and I think that the bottom, you don't quite see the bottom, but there's two-way traffic at the alley there as well. with the sustainable design features, these are just some of the bullet points that we're trying to achieve. We have we're pushing towards low carbon, all electric building. We will have, we're working towards getting solar on the roof. We'll have some electric charging stations for EV ready infrastructure and bike storage and park service amenities for your bikes. Stormwater management, Energy Star appliances, recycling and composting on site, and sustainable landscaping features. And then that's kind of you.
All right. The project is going to be financed using low-income housing tax credits. The application was submitted last year in coordination with the Housing Authority of Cook County and the City of Evanston. It is a competitive process, and we were fortunate to have received an award in the first application. In general, usually the Illinois Housing and Development Authority has is usually oversubscribed. They probably had over 100 applicants. The state puts out a qualified allocation plan with the state goals, and they look at all the way from design to site and location to market viability. Their goal is that you are developing in areas that are providing residents the most opportunities, and it's not in extreme poverty, as an example. So obviously we're very excited to bring this development to Evanston with all the opportunities families will have from amenities, retail, and schools. We structured this project will be going to what is called a new guideline within the low-income housing tax credit. It's called income averaging, which in the past low-income housing tax credit was mostly used with a limit of 60% of the average median income. Now the IRS does allow to change that to up to 80%, in essence increasing the families that can benefit from this program. So this project will be having what we call income averaging up to 80% of the AMI. So residents can qualify depending on their household. So as long as they qualify within the average median income levels on the property. For the family of four, just to give you an example, and again, this matter on the household family type, an 80% AMI is about 88,240. I needed glasses. This is, and in general, the data showed us that this is above the median household income in the immediate 1 mile radius. Of the 18 of the 60, so 42 are going to be what we call straight low-income housing tax credit. 18 are going to be including what we call project-based vouchers through the Housing Authority of Cook County. So approximately a third of the site currently is owned by a agreement between HUD and the Housing Authority of Cook County. And they have currently 4 duplex homes, those will be demolished, and it will be coordinated, the transition of those residents, and they will have a right of return to the property. And then we will increase the amount, so we will have 18 units available through the project-based voucher program of HAC. That they qualify those tenants, but the benefit of that program is that the tenants will never pay more than 30% of the income, and the Housing Authority of Cook County provides rental subsidy for them for the balance of the rent cost in the project. Also, the Housing Authority of Cook County will be a partner in the ownership of this project together with an entity formed by Pearl and Pearl developers, and then investors that come into the deal as part of the LIHTC investment. I think that's, I just had a little bit of data of the City of Evanston needs. So it was pretty much noting that 40% of the residents pay more than a third of the income of housing. I think Sarah is here with the city, which has extensively researched the affordable housing needs in the city. And I mean, these were more for the public to understand our process, and we started with the award. We put the application in 2021, and it was awarded in the spring of 2022 to the city of Evanston. We're here with the rezoning process. We started design in June. We're pretty much starting design and the rezoning. We did do community engagement and started that back in the fall. And here we are, September 13th, land use meeting, and our goal is to continue the process with the construction start in the spring of 2024 if everything gets approved. Thank you. So we're here now to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Westerberg?
Just quickly, just to get a sense of how this was discussed with neighbors, how many neighborhood meetings were there? And when did those start? Do you know?
If you could please get up to a microphone so we can hear you on the recording. Thank you.
Yeah, we've had 2, I think, official neighborhood meetings with Pearl. I understand the city started neighborhood and charrettes. I don't know how the date, but will pass. And then we've also had other meetings to council as it involved with the RFP process. So we have been presented to the city probably 4 or 5 times. I don't have the exact numbers, but we can get it to you.
Also, just
My understanding is that this was kind of conceptualized in 2017. So it's been quite a long time. And then I think there was quite a bit of community outreach. I don't know the exact number. At least 2 or 3 meetings that were conducted in between 2019 and 2021 at the neighborhood level.
Okay. I have a question on that Hinman Avenue extension that comes down to the east of the proposed building. Is that already vacated? No. That is a public right-of-way, correct? Will that become part of the development? How does that work?
Only partial. I think the partial vacation is 33 feet of the total right-of-way. And then I think that's 5 feet east of or 6 feet east of the development. And then the entire Hinman section and then that parkway to the east will remain public property.
Okay, all right. So that 5-foot setback is pretty close. I'm a little concerned about that. I'm also concerned, where is your loading area here, loading dock? I thought I read with the traffic study that area might be used as well as the area on South Boulevard, which could create problems with traffic, problems for neighbors. So is there a loading dock in the back of the building where your parking spaces are located?
There's no designated loading dock. And for the loading dock, are you referring to like loading just the residential, so there are spaces in the, like the various handicaps and stuff like that they can use, and they have to go through those, you have your access aisles so that if you parked there in the meantime or park in your parking space, but there's no designated loading dock.
All right, so there's nothing, say, for folks moving in or moving out. What happens with those vehicles? Where do they go?
Have you guys had any discussions other than just what I said, in the areas between the parking? And then see how in the front there, it's kind of light there. I don't know if this has a point. There's multiple ADA accessible units there that if you're parked there, you can kind of in between cars get your furniture. That's 8 foot in multiple locations. You can go through that.
Okay. What would it take to get an actual loading area within the perimeter of your site there at the back?
Yeah, we would have to review with civil and see what kind of space we can come up with.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking is this has come up before on similar size projects, and there have been issues to try to suggest that somehow the neighborhood can handle the increased traffic or the loading in and out. It doesn't necessarily work so well.
Right. We could take a look. I think the challenge will be, we probably have some flexibility. We talked about this, about the parking count. So we just probably have to accommodate, reducing the parking count and accommodate, but I do agree, I think it's a good idea.
I will compliment you in having enough parking, which is great. For once, I'm not going to rail on that too much.
Just to follow up on the loading, another idea, these parking spaces, would they be assigned or not?
Usually, we do not assign parking spaces.
So, so that means that if someone is moving in or moving out, that's scheduled. So you can block off those parking spaces for the period that you need them for loading. Is there enough clearance though for a truck underneath the building?
Maybe I should stay up here. It's about a 10-foot clearance, so it exceeds the minimum requirements of ADA vans and has additional space.
Not semis?
No, not semis, no.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't necessarily have semis coming in, I don't think. For moving semis? Yeah, all right. Sorry, a couple more questions. Your geosurvey and report just talked a little bit about some soil tests that were done, some borings that were done, revealed some groundwater that is on site there. I'm assuming, of course, you'll be monitoring that during construction. Will you also be setting up any other monitoring stations for the neighbors directly to the west and east in terms of what happens during construction with anything that's going down?
We were investigating if the city has specific requirements that was raised in the past. I mean, definitely Leopardo Construction is a major multi-unit family developer in the city, and I don't think if they have in Evanston, but they are very familiar to building to the lot line. We're currently working on another project where we're monitoring with video cameras and pictures. They also are used to using sensors, so we'll develop a plan that will be reviewed through your engineering review that satisfy the city. I don't have all the details exactly of what we will use.
And then who will, again, getting a little confused between all the partners in this, who will actually be operating the building, the property? And I think you mentioned there would be a part-time person. Is there an office on site for on-site management? How does that work?
Yes, the property will be owned in partnership with HAC, Pearl, and a new entity with investor, but it will be managed and operated between Pearl and HAC. We will hire a third-party property manager. Right now, we are anticipating Ludwig Company, who works with our company in Illinois. They do have properties that they manage in Lake County. I don't think they're exactly in Evanston, but they are very experienced with the management of our apartments. And then on site, this project, because of the amount of units, it wouldn't be a full-time person, but there will be a part-time leasing agent, a property manager, that will have an office space in the facility, and will have dedicated hours to be connected with the residents.
Commissioner Linville?
I just have a quick question. Having gone out and looked at the site yesterday, actually, there is at least one house that has frontage on the Hinman right-of-way that's located to the east. Is that what those kind of drives are? So they will. That'll remain a public right-of-way, and they will have access to their property. Am I correct?
Correct. The exact, what that exactly ends up being, I think there's ongoing negotiations between the city and those property owners about what that would look like, but that's the intent.
Yeah. There's two properties, so we have obviously noted the two access points, and they'll continue to have that, and that will be right away.
I have a question. The packet mentioned numerous times about how the project is seeking net zero certification. certification by who, and how is that going about?
Yes, there is, through the low-income housing tax credit program, we actually have a commitment to net zero through the Enterprise Green Plus program. That is, I say the goal, because there aren't that many, if any, I'm aware of net zero certified projects. In Chicago has very few, and here I don't know if there's one. You probably know more. So that is our intent. When we go through the process, we will be going through Enterprise Green Plus.
Is that a requirement?
That is a requirement under the 9% low-income housing tax credit program and the award. We could swap certifications and go with LEED, for example.
Okay.
But the intent has to still be there.
Okay, because I was rereading the Evanston Green Building Ordinance, which has been recently updated, and and I work in sustainability, and often people have a joke about net zero because they say, there's different ways to define net and there's different ways to define zero.
Yeah.
And, so I'm a little concerned that going via the net zero certification would allow you to avoid the LEED Gold requirement in the, no? So what is the case?
They will have to comply with the Green Building Ordinance. So we do have standards that they will have to comply with. We do allow for alternative equivalents through that ordinance. So that is something that would be looked at during the building permitting process. But they
Right.
would have to, at a minimum, achieve LEED Gold or an equivalent to LEED Gold.
And,
Okay.
and Enterprise Green Communities Plus is often considered an equivalent because you're going to have
Okay.
very close to the same.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the net zero will be a upgrade to the goal in general, but yes, we will definitely
Okay,
work
thank you.
with them.
So, following up on that, on the net zero, if this is a requirement of your funding and you don't achieve it, because it seems like a very high bar, not many people are doing it. Does that mean you don't do the project?
Not necessarily. The way it works is obviously it's the IDA, Illinois Housing and Development Finance Authority. We've gone through this in the past. They view at the situation why we didn't require. I mean, what is the reasoning? And then there's usually there is a agreement to, like she said, find an equivalent. That's usually the case. And if not, if you cannot achieve an equivalent or an agreement with them, what will be an equivalent, then you kind of get negatively assessed in a future project through the Illinois Housing Development Authority, given that we've been in the market for many years, and that's our primary development role. So that's something we really want to avoid.
I don't understand the requirements as much as maybe my fellow commissioners, but I understand that basically that net zero means that you're creating energy as opposed to LEED, which is reducing the use of energy. That's a big deal, and I just wonder if you've thought that through.
That's where the solar arrays on the rooftops are going to come into play. And so with
Could you get a little closer to the mic? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
That's where the solar arrays come into play on the rooftop, and our goal for that right now is so that those solar arrays provide enough energy to at least go towards the house meter, so like the common area lighting and things like that. So that's solar array is part of that goal in terms of the net energy.
Yeah, and I think we usually, in every meeting before this one, we had our energy consultant expert with us, and this evening he couldn't attend. So apologies for that. But we understand the commitment. We also, I mean, it's not only there is ways that we're able to do purchase agreements for solar. It will be all electric. I mean, we're currently going through the design process, and we do have, I think I noted them, an expert just working with us on that. We do acknowledge, I mean, it is an innovation, and that's why when we went through the city, we didn't commit to the certification. We committed, obviously, to meet your energy requirements, but for that reason, because we didn't want to like fully commit when we hadn't gone through the process. Now with IDA, we committed to a net zero certification. And again, the goal is enterprise green, and we will work with them with LEED. We have other ways. We are also, actually, this project will include you've probably seen this in other projects. It's the COMET Energy Efficiency Grant. That carries its own sustainability, so our team is very familiar with that. And then we also will go for 45L credits. Those are another tax incentive. So all of those resources also allow us to hopefully commit and do our best absolute efforts, because we wouldn't get those financing into the project if we don't achieve those.
Commissioner Linville?
Just a quick question. This property will be on the tax rolls?
This probably will have a tax reduction.
Yeah, no,
because
but it's not going to be zero.
We are still working through the HAC. That will be our partnership with HAC, who they're going to be actually about half owner of the property. We haven't actually finalized the tax cost here, so that will be something we have to work with them.
Okay.
So you have sometimes like a pilot program. There's different tax reductions. So, but it is expected it will be
somewhat taxable.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there are different categories for low-income or housing and affordable housing, so.
Yeah.
But the city property right now is not on the tax rolls either, so I presume that would be.
We'll have to come back with the assessment, but it is expected as a reduced tax.
I have a couple of questions.
Commissioner Manship.
Architectural. Will the building have a basement?
No.
No. Why did you raise the floor of the ground floor 4 steps up?
That's more you.
So I will go through, let's say, the vertical section questions.
Okay.
Because one of the allowances that you're applying for is the building height. So it's 60 feet, 62 feet instead of the allowed 50. You have floor to floor height 13 feet for the ground floor and 11 feet for each other floor. What is the clear room height inside?
Clear inside the floors 2 through 5 is 9 feet after you put in the structure of there. And then on the lower floors, depending on how much we have in terms of mechanical, we'll be between 9 and 10 finished.
What is the structure? The floor structure, and how deep is it?
The floor structure will be on the first floor, it'll be steel trusses. And then on the second floor framing. And then on the upper floors, it'll be 24-inch wood trusses.
Can you reduce this so that you comply with the height, or at least reduce the 62 feet down to, let's say, 54?
Yeah, I wouldn't see us being able to do much more than from 24 to 22 inches is typically what in terms of when you start to reduce the amount there. Overall, in terms of the spans that we have from where our bearing walls are, we're 22 inches would be probably the least amount we would be able to do. So you're only gaining 2, 4, 6, about 6 to 8 inches down further if you went to 22. So we could definitely look at that concept as well.
Okay, the other question is, this is serious structure with serious parking, but there is once again something about the impervious surface coverage and not, I would say, not sufficient green areas. Is it possible that you sacrifice, let's say, some parking spaces so that you have some green areas and, let's say, kids' playgrounds?
We have a kids' playground on the roof deck, or it's not like a big equipment play area. And then I'll let him handle why don't you handle the height and the impervious, please?
Yeah, I'm Brad Ovanik from Cage Civil. So from an impervious standpoint, you're right, we do not have, permeable pavers or anything like that right now. However, we are planning for underground detention, which has an open bottom and promotes infiltration. And compared to the site right now, we're very similar in the total amount of impervious area. So really what we're providing is better stormwater management than what's out there right now, complying with all of the city regulations and MWRD regulations. So in terms of, you know, open space area for playgrounds, like what you said, there's the 4th floor balcony, that's what you want to call it, for that. That has green space up there. And then as for the site, we could explore looking at reducing the parking spaces, but this is what we found to be adequate for the development.
Thank you. And last question. You have about 60 apartments. And I made a quick count, and it seems that 25 of these apartments have only north exposure. And about, I believe, 9 have only one small windows either to east or to west. Were there any efforts to improve this?
Yeah, we looked at overall in terms of the placement of the units that we could get. You know, when you have 3-bedroom units, you need those to be on kind of a corner space and everything. So we've looked at providing the windows in, we have them on the south and the north side. And then the ones that you see on the east are mostly supporting like those 3 bedrooms. All windows provided within the units will meet the minimum requirements that the IDA requires plus code. So they'll have the minimum daylighting that they're required to have within the unit.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sterling has a point.
I just wanted to make a quick statement to your question, Commissioner Miranchev. A significant contributor to the impervious surface ratio is the 20 required public parking spaces. This is also a site that's very well served by public parks.
All right. Other questions from commissioners at this time? Hearing none, I do have several people who have signed up to speak. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Is there a sign-in sheet?
There is a sign-in sheet that was out at the beginning of the meeting. If you'd like to sign up, please come up and do it now.
I was at another.
Yeah. Yeah, you can speak for 20 minutes. I'll be leaving. I'll be leaving before that time. Those are my numbers. Don't pay any attention to those. I write those down so I can tell who's speaking on what issue. That's fine. You don't even have to let it in. I got that.
And again, if these items are already brought up, I will just skip at the end. So you might have hoped that this list is shorter. There you go. You're okay?
No, just light down there. So I have 12 people who have signed up to speak on this. Chair will grant 2.5 minutes per speaker. If you do not need that time, please don't feel you need to fill it. And if someone gets up and says something and you agree with them, it's perfectly fine to get up and say, I agree with the previous speaker. So I'll begin. The first speaker that I do have signed up tonight is Bonnie Wilson. And how do I do half minutes here? I can't? Okay. I can't do half minutes, so I'm going to
I
trust you to
timed
go
it.
about 2.5 to 3 minutes.
I timed it, so it should be 2.5 minutes.
All right.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bonnie Wilson. I've been a real estate agent in Evanston for over 39 years. And one of my most difficult and challenging times in being in real estate is finding rentals for my clients who cannot afford to buy a home in Evanston, but would love to live here because they work in Evanston. I just looked today on the multiple listing service, or the MLS as people refer to it. This is what I found out. I did a comparative market analysis. This report shows all the apartments that were rented in the last 6 months and are now for rent. And all of these rentals are within a 6-block radius of the development on South Boulevard. I will be passing this packet around, but I will tell you what I found out. The average rent for a 1-bedroom today is $1,625. The average rent for a 2-bedroom today is $2,299. The average rent for a 3-bedroom today is $3,500. Apartments that have been rented in the last 6 months, sorry, can you give me time for this? Yes. The low rental price is $1,250. The medium rental price is $1,975. The average rental price was $2,340, and the maximum rental price is $5,500. Compared to the new development at 504, 514 South Boulevard, 1-bedrooms will rent between $556 to $1,573. 2-bedrooms will be $1,336 to $1,804. 3-bedrooms rents will be $1,544 to $1,988. That's a lot different than what things are renting for today. Please support this development. It will make my life a lot easier, and my client tenants will be very happy that they can now work and live in Evanston. Actually, I used to live a block away at 530 Hinman. I just moved 3 years ago. The parking lot was almost always empty of cars. It is an eyesore. South Boulevard is also, as you all know, is the entrance when you drive into Evanston. Wouldn't it be nice to see this very attractive building instead of an empty parking lot, or a parking lot now I understand has lots of trucks? It's very unattractive. The only thing I can remember about the parking lot is the loud fireworks that would go off every 4th of July. This development is very much needed in this area of Evanston, close to transportation and the lake. Please support this development at 504 to 514 South Boulevard. Thank you. Perfect. Would you like these to be passed out?
Sure, if you want to bring those up. Here, just hand them to me. All right. Well, Commissioner Hallett can pass them down. The next speaker I have signed up is Tony Ray.
Hi, I'm Tony Ray. I live at 1020 Grove. And I am actually going to be reading a statement written by Virginia Ayers, who is on 2 committees that I'm on. We both serve on Joining Forces for Affordable Housing and Interfaith Action of Evanston Advocacy Committee. She writes better than I, so I'm reading her statement, and she couldn't be here tonight. The mixed-income housing development on South Boulevard is a welcome addition to affordable housing in Evanston. We are in desperate need of housing for the many people who work in our school systems, university, and hospitals. The long delay in approving this development must end tonight. NIMBY complaints are yesterday's news. We all need to live together in mixed-income neighborhoods throughout this city. Please do the right thing and approve this zoning request so this development can move on. And Virginia Ayers lives on South Boulevard. Thank you.
Next speaker I have is Rosemary, and I'm gonna ruin the last name. Armacida. Okay. I couldn't tell if that was an S or a C or a U.
I live at 530 Michigan, and I have several concerns. I actually wrote something. I don't know if you all got that email that I sent a couple of days ago. Have you seen that? Okay. So you understand my concerns. And I think for me, I am all for affordable housing, but the issues of parking and the construction work, which will probably take 2 years, and the building, the disruption on I live right off of South Boulevard. So the disruption to the traffic flow, that is a main artery, as someone mentioned, coming into the city. So that's my biggest concern. And there was actually some talk about the fact that there was some, I think Melissa Wynn said, they have been talking about the CTA closing the Purple Line station at South Boulevard. So if that happened, that isn't an access point. They're doing some work on the streets recently for the sidewalks, and so people can't park there, but they haven't been able to start the work yet. So people are scrambling to find a place to park their car now. And it's 60 units, but that is maybe 180 people. It's not just 60 people. So that's a concern, the number of, it's not even the people, it's really the parking and the traffic, the influx, and that concentrated in that one area, I think is going to be, it seems really problematic to me. It's already a huge issue for the people who live on South Boulevard. And again, I wrote some things, and there were some things that were, you had 3 things that were non-compliant, I saw on the website. And so I know that the loading dock was one of them, and then the easement in front of the building, and there was one other thing, I'm not remembering what that was, but I hope that those things are addressed before we move forward with this project. I think people, from my estimation, it seems to me after 2 weeks ago at a community meeting that Melissa Wynn held, our councilwoman, that I think people still had a lot of questions. I think we need a little more transparency. They're saying, yeah, we'll be working on this, and before all those things go through, before you give that your approval, I hope that some of those things are really in place, as opposed to getting the approval and then, oh, we'll try and fix this and we'll do that. And I just think that there needs to be more clarity as far as I'm concerned as a resident. And again, speaking with other residents after that meeting, I think that was a common problem. And again, in favor of affordable housing. That is not really the issue. The issue is the impact on the people who are currently living in the community. And I just want to mention one other thing really quickly. Someone at that meeting mentioned that there was damage done when they were doing some road construction on South Boulevard a few years ago that damaged their foundation. And that was brought up at the last meeting. And I believe that, and I would like to get verification on this, that if that happens to the structure of people's homes, because some of that property was landfill, and they're going to put these 4 big footings in the ground because there is no basement, that if that starts ruining the structures of people's homes, who's going to pay for that? How is that going to be handled? Okay, thank you.
My next speaker that I have signed up is Sue Lullabach.
So I'm Sue Lullabach. I'm with Connections for the Homeless and lead a coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. And I can't stress how excited we are about this project. This does not happen very often, that there is a city-owned lot that can be used for something like this, that a developer actually succeeds in getting low-income housing tax credits, and that we can actually see 60 new units of affordable housing come to the community. So this is really an amazing opportunity. If you move forward with this, there will be problems that need to be solved, and you've heard about some of those. From what we heard at the community meeting and tonight, those are all problems that can be addressed. And we do not want to hear from anybody that we're all for affordable housing, but we're not going to do it because of those problems. Those problems need to be addressed and solved so that we can have this housing. They should not be an obstacle. So we really hope that you will move forward with this and carefully consider people's concerns, but not use those as barriers, but as opportunities to make this a better development and something that can move forward, because there are people waiting for these units that are suffering without having access to them. So this is just a wonderful opportunity, and we hope that you will move it through as quickly as you can while addressing the community concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lulbach. The next speaker I have signed up is Fergal Hanks.
So do I just say my name?
Just say your name and address, please, for the record.
So my name is Fergal Hanks. I live at 1500 Chicago Avenue. I would strongly encourage you to support this project. It's going to produce a lot of kind of needed affordable housing, particularly in kind of the 2 and 3 bedroom sizes, which are important for enabling families to live in affordable housing. I want to highlight one part of the staff report that described this area. So this area kind of in the 1920s was developing quite quickly until the kind of introduction of the zoning plan to Evanston, which led to kind of mass dezoning in Evanston, essentially mass downzoning in Evanston. They said the resulting juxtaposition and diversity of residential densities, socioeconomic strata, architectural forms and styles, and housing choice has created a unique identity and richness that is desirable, but largely not replicable under current land use controls. This development is an opportunity to kind of continue that legacy of this area. In addition, kind of what is being replaced is kind of a parking lot. Kind of this is not a kind of valuable use of land relative to kind of housing for 60 housing units, kind of some said up to 90 people. That's like 90 people who are going to be able to live in Evanston, paying affordable rents, and potentially rather than driving all the way up kind of from somewhere else to Evanston to get to work, they will now be able to take kind of the CTA, which is nearby, and I have no idea where people got the idea they would close the CTA station from.
All right.
I mean, if you build dense housing there, you're going to increase the demand for the use of the South Boulevard Station, and so kind of this would encourage, kind of make them less likely to close it. And also the way to reduce traffic is not to kind of is to build dense housing near transit, so people take transit instead of driving. That's how you get cars off the road, not by banning people from living nearby and forcing them to drive in to Evanston. I'm in favor of affordable housing, both in the abstract and in practice like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hanks. The next speaker I have is Larry Donahue.
My name is Larry Donahue. I live in the 3rd Ward at 525 Chicago Avenue. I live less than a block from the proposed development. I welcome and strongly support this project, and I appreciate all of the hard work our council person, Melissa Wynn, has done, and the city staff members, Sarah Flax, Paul Zelmazek, in shepherding this project through the past 7 years of changes. It's resulted in a project that is superb in many ways. The substantive contribution to affordable housing, to our affordable housing stock, the focus on units for families, the architectural style, the eye on environmental concerns, the thoroughness of the analysis of the impact of the new development on traffic, for example, and the incorporation of community feedback. I especially support this project because it creates affordable housing opportunities outside of the wards where affordable housing tends to be concentrated. Our corner of Evanston has so many attractive features. It's great that this project will give other people an opportunity to share in those amenities. Please approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. The next speaker I have signed up is Rhonda Present.
Thank you. So many people have said what I was going to say, so I'm going to quickly go through it. But my name is Rhonda Present. I've been a resident of the 3rd Ward for 30 years, the past 27 of which I've been at 546 Michigan Avenue, which is between South Boulevard and Keeney on Michigan. And I, too, am a strong proponent of this project and would really like to see it move forward. We definitely need more affordable housing in our community, in our neighborhood, in our community at large. However, I think that the proposed modifications are something that really need to be given more thoughtful consideration. I think we could still have 48 affordable housing units there instead of 60. I think we could look more closely at that and the impact in the surrounding area. It is, as noted in the study, the market study that was included in the packet about how dense the area already is. And it really is. And what they also fail to mention, not only South Boulevard, this artery in Chicago Avenue has also gotten much more congested if anybody's been driving up and down there. So you basically have this property in between these very busy arteries, and there's no doubt that it's going to have an impact. I know, not just for moving trucks or, already we have enough issues with, the FedEx delivery and the Amazon delivery blocking streets where you can't get by. So, and the city is also at the same time considering changing the South Boulevard, changing the entrance into Evanston from 4 lanes to 2. So if you consider that lakefront proposal that's happening at the same time that we're talking about building 60 units, of housing with potentially 180, 200 people, it's something we really need to be looking more closely at. So yes, really in favor of the project, think it's way too dense, really think we need to look at the scale, and, if it means stepping back a little and working more creatively to get, as the lady mentioned, really coming up with some good solutions, I think we can do it, and I think it can be a wonderful development for our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. President. Next up is Abby Rosenzweig.
Good evening. My name is Abby Rosenzweig. I live at 616 Hinman, which is less than a block north of the proposed development. And I'm here this evening to speak very quickly with unqualified support for this proposed project. In short, as many people have said, Evanston is in desperate need of more affordable housing. I welcome it to my neighborhood. I want to raise my family in a city that lives its values. And I want to be a city that welcomes more people to take advantage of this place that I love so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Dory Stein is up next.
Hello, my name is Dory Stein, and I live at 505 Hinman. And I am disappointed in the fact that For a long time, one of the reasons we have a problem with affordable housing is that developers were allowed, rather than building scattered site housing, the developments that went up all along Chicago Avenue, they were allowed to not put in affordable housing and give money to a fund. I grew up in the neighborhood. I have lived in my house for over 30 years. We are a neighborhood, and everyone's talking about affordable housing, but what about our household and the 7 African-American families that are part of our neighborhood that are going to be displaced? Jacob Blake Jacob Blake III of Jacob Blake Manor, who's a very big, Evanstonian, and we have a building named after him, grew up next door to me. We're low income. I'm on disability. Some of my neighbors have lived in those townhomes for a long time. We heard that they're not, they need to be updated. And yet, we were discussing this project during COVID, 3 of the 4 units were vacant. I mean, why are projects always going in the neighborhoods where you have poor people? I mean, we talk about diversity, and right up the block, there was a home. It was a historical home. I used to work for the city in the planning department. Part of the Underground Railway. That's part of our history, too. Oh, it's not architecturally significant because it's a low-income home. I mean, what about us? What about the schools? How are the children going to get across the street? These are things that need to be answered. The fact that there's an indoor space, I mean, poor people deserve green space too. They do. And that's important. And this is a project that's out of size with the neighborhood, and it's destroying a low-income neighborhood. It is. And I've come to meetings for years and talked about the need for affordable housing and said, what's happening to all these big buildings? If we had done this and talked about this from the beginning, we wouldn't have to have a building that you say is so big. And what's going to happen to me and my neighbors? What's going to happen to us? The other developer that bid for this, they talked to us. They talked about using reparation money and home ownership. I mean, that's important too. Not just to live in a building that's going to only be affordable part of it for a certain amount of time. I mean, they were willing to do 0 interest loans. So Connections for the Homeless is talking about, yeah, we need affordable housing, but there was a proposal that was much more in keeping with the neighborhood where they talked to all of us. That green space behind the 4 townhomes, we've had wonderful neighborhood block parties there for years and years. I watched my neighbors' children grow up. That's all going to be gone.
Thank you, Ms. Stein. Next up, I have Rafael Castellanos.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me today. My name is Rafael Castellanos. I reside at 413 South Boulevard in Evanston. I'm about 250 feet away from the property. I'm all in favor of the project as it exists. However, I think there's a lot of concerns related to how this is being constructed. And I'm also concerned about all the variances that are being requested. It seems to be significant. I'm not the expert, but when I look at density, height, side yard setback, street side yard setback, impervious surface ratio, off-street loading, I mean, it seems to be significant. And there doesn't seem to be much in the way of any kind of mitigation to those variances or proposals other than just the one I heard around the loading dock. So I'm concerned about traffic. I'm concerned about the comment about even delivery trucks and so on. If there's nowhere to go with all these equipment and materials and people moving in and out, especially when you got 3-bedroom apartments, I mean, it's significant. And it could be a semi-truck moving in with somebody with 3-bedroom apartment. So that's one of those concerns. So I'm just concerned that there's just too many variances coming at this at once. I think somebody needs to go back to the drawing board and take a look at it. I'm not an architect, I'm not an expert, but when I hear there's a 24-inch, between floors, I think that's just the materials they're using. I'm thinking there's probably concrete structures that could be used to, reduce that height as well. You don't have to go with what they've got. You can go with something else. Also concerned about other, non-structural related. The project financing and funding, there seems to be a lack of transparency on that. I keep hearing about investors, the county, the city, but there's no clear path to any of this. I'm concerned the project might start and then it's going to stop midway because financing run out. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but it's hard to point to something if you can't find it in the first place. The third thing I'm concerned around is affordability in the vetting process. What's the eligibility requirements to be a tenant? What are the credits? What are the vouchers? It all seems to be kind of spoken to, but there's nothing I can't put my hands on. I can't look at a 400-page document to find anything on it references that. So it's of concern, okay? The third is around building management and property management. I don't even, until tonight, I didn't hear that there was even going to be an on-site property manager, which is good to know. But again, if they need space in the building, where is that space? Where are they going to be sitting? Where's their office? Those kind of things. They're small things, but again, you're concerned. And then one more thing on the demographics. The proposals on this initially back in 2017 went from a 60-40 affordable mix to 80-20. Now it's 100%. So I think that changes the demographics of the building quite a lot. When you've got tenants in a building who are 100% affordable, I just worry about the care and maintenance of certain units and certain properties within the building. It's just a concern. I think when there's other people who have a vested interest and are paying full freight rental space, they're going to make a little bit more of a comment to the other tenants. Say, hey, why don't you not put trash in the hallway and take it downstairs like you're supposed to? That kind of thing. And then finally, around the comment that was made around solar and energy reduction measures, there's a comment in the document that states proposed building will be net zero certified and include a wide array of energy reduction measures required through that certification, including being all electric, providing an electric vehicle charging station, and then 2, studying the viability of rooftop solar. So I didn't see anything that says there's going to be solar on day one. So somebody raised the issue from this panel about net zero, and again, I'm not seeing anything about solar installations on day one. Thank you.
Sorry, Raphael.
The next speaker I have signed up is Tom Wheeler.
Good evening. My name is Tom Wheeler. I reside at 515 South Boulevard. And like many here, I'm very supportive of low-income housing. My main concerns here are primarily related to, well, there's one question from one of the commissioners here, public outreach. I do not think this was a well-researched project when it comes to interaction with the local community, not just Third Ward, but the local community that's going to be most impacted. And in our first meeting, we were told that the residents of this building would be firemen, teachers, police officers, and of course it was, how could anybody not want people like that in our community? So over the course of the early years, we had very few meetings with the city, and by 2018, I sent out 8 FOA requests to get a better understanding of impact on the community, impact on traffic. When it comes to transparency, I feel there's been a total lack of transparency. The responses to my requests came back that no public information was available. So my main concern here, and I think this has been a theme tonight, is that the lack of transparency, the lack of understanding by the community of impact. I am supportive of this kind of housing. I actually think the building design is beautiful. I think its scope is too large. I think it should be reduced somewhat. Somebody mentioned 48 units instead of 60. I would be supportive of that. I think overall its impact on the community is, from a gut feeling, very significant, and I would like to see if we can reduce that.
Mr. Wheeler. And the final speaker who signed up is Michael Ollinger.
Close enough. I'll make it real quick. I think a lot of good ideas here, right? I agree a lot with Tom, especially since he drove me here, right? So I live very close, 519 Chicago Avenue, right? To me, it's the concept of the density of the project, scale and scope. I've been following sort of all these community meetings along. I agree with some of what he says about transparency, right? Early on, everybody was supportive of the housing. We need it. We already have, there are community members there, right? And we had the idea that, yeah, there's some space that we could expand out, bring more people in. But I think somehow where it went from, especially when talking meetings with Melissa, like, no, we know it's R9, we're not going to go any higher than this, right? I think someone brought up the idea of that, you know, we don't need to just stack people up. We need to give them green spaces, right? A cemetery in the back, right, doesn't provide green spaces for kids to play. A place on the 4th floor inside doesn't provide places, green space for people to be, right? So I think the footprint just kept there as creep, right? Throughout all these meetings, I think the concern was, okay, we need to make it big. It's got to be economical to build, right? 4 units, probably not enough, not economical. And all of a sudden, it got to be like, oh, now this meeting, we're at R5, right? Just seems like there's creep in what went there. And it's a very congested area, right? Especially if we're putting, you know, that many families, right? You need space to live, right? We need the 3 bedrooms, right? But it's a busy intersection, right? And especially if we're talking about, I think there's also a project talking about increasing a bike lane on Chicago as well, right? So you can hardly find parking. I know that the parking space, right? But if you're talking about street parking, it's very difficult to find. You're putting in, you know, you got to think people are going to have a car, right? Let's say they have 1.5 cars, right? That's not enough parking spaces right there. So I would just say that support the project, right? I think the scale is probably too big, especially considering all things going on in the congested area. Thanks for your time.
So that was all the speakers I had signed up for this evening. Have I missed anyone who signed up that I did not call? Seeing none, I will turn it back over to the applicant if there's anything you'd like to say in summation or anything you would like to respond to from citizen comment.
All right. No, thank you everyone for your time. I understand there appear to be a lack of transparency. That's not our goal. I want to know that we can work with Kate to upload any information. I mean, we can probably provide financing too and upload it to the site. Noting that we're still through the process and we're probably a month away. I want to highlight inflation is no news to anyone. And affordable housing is still the same cost as market rate housing. So these units are very well, that's our goal, high quality. I mean, ultimately, they are significant costs. So definitely we have the challenge of making the construction cost work for the project. We still obviously are working with an entire team of experts here. And then the last thing is in the unit count. We definitely assessed early on with the city, the need, the site location, also even expanding to allow for less height. And then I want to note that the award of the tax credit is definitely tied to the unit count. So we will willing to work on the height where we can engineering-wise. The design of the structure of wood trusses is informed by the net zero goals. We will put solar panels. The reason why we didn't say from day one is because there's so many options we have with solar. The goal is that the project does not use, I mean, pretty much contains its own energy. And there's also a way that we could do purchase agreements with utility companies. I mean, there's many ways, so we don't want to restrict ourselves, but we do anticipate to put solar panels, but the goal is not just to put them, is to create and generate the best energy for the site. So I'm here. We're willing to meet with individuals. Again, we're here to work with staff, commissioners, the Alderwoman, and we're very thankful for your opportunities. Thank you.
So with that, we will close the public testimony and begin deliberations from the commission. I'll just look to Commissioner Halleck since he's always my first person.
I'm on the end here. Yeah, several things. One, as far as the lack of transparency, I think anybody that feels that they haven't been talked to should talk to Melissa Wynn. She's your alderman. We can't do a whole lot about that. If that's an issue, that's unfortunate. And so I think the alderman would have something to say about that. My other comments about the project, I have a little bit of experience in this type of project and how it's funded and the construction that results from the program and the funding, and it's all part of the same multifaceted equation. It's tough, and I think the fact that they have gotten approval from the county is amazing. The county must have so many applications. I know from experience, it's crazy, and to select this project is a real honor, I would say, and they selected it because the proposal was a good combination of all those things, of number of units, type of units, number of affordable, type of construction. All that stuff goes into how they evaluate these projects. So I think that's to the developer's credit. I think that once you start saying, oh, let's not do 60, let's do 40 units or whatever, that just throws the whole equation off, and it probably would kill the project. So even though there may be things that you might want to see a little less units or a little more green space or something like that, those things might be able to be negotiated down the way, but at this point, the equation doesn't allow it, is my belief. And so I think what's been proposed, nice looking building, I think it's.
Thank you. Commissioner Westerberg.
So it'd be interesting to have some discussion on this idea of height and density. The project that was approved for Church Street, I believe the city council ended up asking the developer to reduce that from 5 stories to 4 stories. I'm not entirely sure that makes a difference if the bulk remains, but I'd be interested just for all of us to talk a little bit more about that. I am sure that the economics of this do determine what can be done. But is this too much height and density for this area? I'd kind of like to hear from some of the others on that.
Sure. Actually, I think that the height and density at this particular site is appropriate. I also have been tangentially involved in low-income tax credit projects, and my understanding is that 60 units is kind of about what IDA, which is the state agency actually, requires. So I don't know that you could reduce the number of units and have a viable project. I like the massing along South Boulevard. I think it works pretty well. I like the buffering between the building and then the housing that's to the east of the site. I do have a question for staff. And the staff recommendation, one of the conditions would be that the applicant continue to work with staff on the design details for the north and east elevations. And I think my question is, for staff, kind of what details are you looking to address?
I think that staff had some initial concerns about the complexity of the material palette and also the complexity of the massing and being able to simplify those forms in the palette. And so I think the changes that we would request and work with them would be very minimal, but potentially very impactful.
Okay, and again, it goes along with addressing some of the neighborhood concerns and comments. So I think that that's probably important to do, and I think it's probably important to continue to communicate with the neighborhood about the changes as they, proceed during the building permit process, assuming that the city council approves this. But I'm supportive of the project.
Yeah, I'm supportive as well. I'm really excited actually about this project. I live very close to this location. I use the South Boulevard stop regularly, and that the parking lot is a bit. It's a ripe opportunity. I think the concerns about the variances being requested and the kind of the size and density, I think, are legitimate. And I think if this were a typical project without any low-income housing considerations, I'd be more sympathetic to trying to reduce the density and the scale. But in this case, I feel like it's just an enormous opportunity to have a transit-oriented development right by the station in a prime location that really is suited in a wonderful opportunity. I would want to add the one condition, or I guess two, now that I'm hearing it. One about trying to find ways to add the off-street loading berth, and what we just heard about for staff about the north and south facades.
North and east.
North and east, thank you. Other than that, I'm very supportive and excited about the project.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Miranchov?
So I'll be a little bit more, let's say, concerned about this project. First, let's go through the formal things. About the rezoning from R4 to R5, I'm okay with that. But the fact that immediately after we support the rezoning, here comes 3 significant requests for variances, speaks to me that it's not very okay. So the important thing for me that stand out, it's the bulk, I mean the height and the wall we're creating on South Boulevard. And the other thing is the impervious surface and the lack of green. So I am okay with the density. Definitely the city of Evanston needs that. But this building could be designed better so that it has lower height and it has better outside. The one thing that kind of tips the scale or puts the finger on the scale for me is the 50% of apartments that have only north exposure. I know that it's difficult. It's a long property that somehow seems better developed if it is a long building, put east-west and have north and south exposure. But there are architectural tricks that could be used here so that at least one or couple of rooms in each apartment still have some windows on east and west and not only north exposure. I mentioned this in other projects. We're creating affordable housing, but these are people that will live there with kids and they will not see sunlight during all their life there. So these are my concerns. Once again, I don't mind the rezoning. I don't mind some of the variances, but I think that this project needs improvement to be approved. Thank you.
Commissioner Westerberg?
So I have a similar concern just about the massing of the building, and I know, again, I know how difficult this is to unite the financing with the density that you need to make that work. And I don't have any suggestions other than to see how that height can be reduced, if even by a small amount, could be helpful for that streetscape. For a building of this size not to have its own loading dock is just unacceptable to me. We've been through this before with other developments, and that just needs to happen. If this goes forward, I also think there needs to be a plan for vibration monitoring in the neighboring areas. Those are all very low height buildings, single family homes in there too, and that just needs to be done. I'd also recommend a plan for stormwater and structural analysis to be submitted to the city, just to make sure that that does meet the city's requirements. And the traffic consultant did point to a few issues that I think need to be considered and should be kind of consolidated and agreed to before the proposal goes forward. They talked about taking another look at the crosswalks and how those need to be improved around South Boulevard in Chicago, that better signage for South Boulevard and Callan Avenue, and looking at the timing of lights. And I think that is well worth looking at and making sure we have that right before you go forward.
Thank you. Just general thoughts from me. This reminds me very much of the Ann Rainey building on Howard Street, in terms of kind of its size, the bulk, it abuts a residential neighborhood that is primarily single-family homes. It itself sits on a commercial street, but it does abut an R1, I believe that's R1 over there, district. And so in terms of vibration monitoring, things like that, that was all part of the construction management plan that was in place, and I would expect it to be a part of any construction management plan that would be put in place for this lot, or for this project as well. We use the term low income. I think that's a bit of a misnomer in this case when we're looking at 80% of AMI. We're actually looking at affordable housing, not low income, so that's something I'd like to keep in mind. Also, in terms of, we've heard several concerns raised about parking. As we all know, as we've sat up here many times and heard about parking and how much parking is needed, and we find out that parking is not necessarily as much in demand as we sometimes think it is. And looking at the fact that also the city is requiring 20 parking spaces be maintained for public use, has to be taken into account with that as well. I agree with the loading berth. That causes me great concern, because of the fact that of where people would be unloading. You can't do that in an aisle of a parking lot. You can't do that on South Boulevard, obviously. So that's a concern there. That one I don't feel comfortable moving forward with. I think if we do make a recommendation that we should require a loading berth be fit into the plan somewhere. In terms of side yard setbacks, one of the side yards we're looking at is technically on Hinman, which has the street in between, so it's not like we are truly abutting on a property in the same way that we would. I don't know exactly what the width of Hinman is there, but it's greater than the setback that would be required normally on that property. And the other thing, which we really hadn't heard a lot about, was the rezoning from R4 to R5. That does make sense, again, in kind of looking at a lot of the buildings in this particular area and in this neighborhood. They kind of skew between that R4, R5 area anyway. So that's my general thoughts on it. Any other things before we go through standards?
Just clarify something, the variances being sought are under the R5 scheme, right? Okay, thanks.
So what we'll do is I'm going to go a little backwards here and go with the map amendment first, because obviously if we don't approve that, that takes a lot of other things off the table. So for a map amendment, there are 4 standards that we do look at. And let me just get to the right page here. And the first one is whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive general plan as adopted and amended from time to time by City Council. We do have a comprehensive plan. It is an extremely old document at this point, and it will hopefully be updated very soon to staff. But one of the goals is to provide affordable housing. One of the things that we look at is our overall housing stock, making use, there's a phrase in zoning that is the highest and best use of property. Having an underutilized parking lot is obviously not highest and best use of this particular area. So I believe that standard has been met. B is whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. In looking at the areas that are immediately around here, and I don't have that right in front of me, but as I say, it's R5 right across the street. I know that there's a number of R5, and like I said, even the character of the buildings, whether the zoning truly reflects it, since we have imposed our zoning code upon buildings that predate the zoning code or come close to it. And this is one of those particular neighborhoods that has a lot of that building stock that was built in the 1920s. I believe that standard is also met. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties. Again, kind of looking at the surrounding neighborhood and what type of properties are there, changing this from an R4 to an R5, I don't believe has a great impact on the value of the adjacent properties. And D, the adequacy of public facilities and services. Obviously, this being a new construction for something going in for a parking lot, they will have to bring in, I'm guessing, something to do with expanding sewers, bringing sewers in, additional electric, that sort of stuff. Again, things I know that they had to do on Howard Street. But I believe that standard can be met by making this from an R4 to an R5. Again, that change is not really a greater increase on those public facilities and services from one to the other. So I believe that is met. Is everyone in agreement with my findings on the map amendment? So what I want to do is I want to break this down and take a vote on the map amendment first. So is there a motion to approve the map amendment changing this area of properties from R4 to R5?
I will move, in the case of 504-514 South Boulevard, 23 PLND-0027, that we make a positive recommendation for the map amendment change as described in the packet.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Puctel, seconded by Commissioner Lindwall. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mudinchev?
Yes.
Commissioner Puctel?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes. So with 6 votes in favor and 0 against, there will be a positive recommendation made to City Council on changing the underlying zoning from R4 to R5. Now we go into the actual request for a special use and for plan development. Just a moment, let me get to those pages. The first one I'm going to go through are the special use standards. There are 9 special use standards that we must find are met before we can make a positive recommendation to City Council. The first one being it is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. We do find, I don't know exactly how we defined this as a apartment. Are we defining this as an apartment? It's residential, but is it an apartment?
Multifamily.
Yeah, multifamily residential. So that is one of the uses that is permitted in the zoning ordinance under the R5, which we have just made the recommendation to move to. The second one is in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. Again, my comments that were made on the map amendment kind of go to this as well. The fact that the comprehensive general plan does look at us using our spaces to their highest and best use, as well as providing affordable housing where we can, and providing rehabilitation of underused properties, which this parking lot has been. So that standard is met. Number 3, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole. This obviously will bring increased density to this particular neighborhood. I think that the issues that we have heard addressed or have been raised by some of the neighbors, including parking, concerns about the construction, as well as just the overall density and placement of the building and everything, are legitimate concerns, but I believe that most of those concerns can be addressed through recommendations that we make for conditions to be placed on the property. And so that should make this not have a negative effect in the neighborhood. Next one, does not interfere with or diminish with the value of property in the neighborhood. I would argue that increasing this property by placing a modern building on top of it would increase the property values of surrounding properties. And we have also heard that the property will be moving from non-tax roll to some sort of tax roll status that we have not yet determined. But obviously bringing in additional tax income on that property will also help alleviate some of the other property values, or I'm sorry, the property taxes in the city. Next one, can be adequately served by public facilities and services. As I mentioned before, there will be need for additional electric, sewer, these sorts of things probably brought to this particular lot since it's not being used in a residential capacity currently. But there's no reason to believe that those cannot be accommodated. The next one does not cause undue traffic congestion. We do have a traffic engineering report. There has been discussion about the traffic that is on South Boulevard as well as Chicago Avenue. But one of the reasons that we do put in these types of buildings in a TOD is to hopefully prevent some of that traffic congestion by encouraging people to take public transit, as well as the fact that we are providing parking on site, which also should help in terms of the neighborhood parking. People would be more likely to park here than to park somewhere on Hinman. The other thing that we've heard about is delivery trucks, and unfortunately there's not a lot we can do about delivery trucks. They just kind of park where they want to park when they make their deliveries, and the enforcement of that is up to people other than us. Preserve significant historical or architectural resources. I don't believe there are any historical or architectural resources that are significant in this area that are being impacted. Preserve significant natural and environmental features. This we've heard about a little bit about green space around the building. There will be improved green space that will be created. It also will be a I can't think of the word, tending to be native plants and self-sustaining as opposed to something that's requiring a lot of care and work. So I believe that has been met. I also will note that the building is looking at going to something of a net zero, at least a gold LEED standard, or something of that equivalency, therefore helping lessen its impact on the environment. Finally, it complies with all other applicable regulations of the district in which it is located and other applicable ordinances. Obviously, there are all sorts of things that come with being an affordable housing unit, both at the city level and the state level and the federal level. But there's no reason to believe that this organization, which has done it before and is working with Cook County and the Illinois Department of Housing, also will be working to make sure all of those sorts of regulations are met. Those are the standards for the special use. Is everyone in agreement with my findings on those standards?
Yes.
All right, the next one is we do have 5 standards that are specific to planned developments. So these are larger developments in the city. The special use does cover off on everything from small storefronts to larger projects like this. So these are a little more specific, although there is some overlap. The first one being the requested site development allowances will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties that is beyond a reasonable expectation given the scope of the applicable site development allowances of the planned development location. We really didn't discuss a lot of the public benefits here. A lot of that relates to City Council. They get to make those determinations. I will just say that one of the public benefits that is being addressed here, obviously, is that of affordable housing and providing affordable housing that is modern and up to today's standards. And so that standard is met. The second, the proposed development is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Again, as I've mentioned before, we do have several buildings that are courtyard buildings in this particular area, larger apartment condominium buildings. This feels like it fits right in with that type of character. I will note there are also some smaller homes along here, but we see those kind of scattered throughout South Evanston. But South Evanston does tend to be larger buildings, especially on our arterial streets. The development site circulation is designed in a safe and logical manner to mitigate potential hazards for pedestrians and vehicles at the site and in the immediate surrounding area. I think this is one of those things that there's a little more discussion to be had with planning with the city, with probably Public Works on some of the intersections, timing of traffic lights, those sorts of things. But nothing that I see that is insurmountable and unable to accomplish. The fourth one, the proposed development aligns with the current and future climate and sustainability goals of the city. Going back again to the building will have to comply with our green building ordinance, as well as their plans to go with net zero, which is above and beyond what our green ordinance suggests, or requires, but that I see no reason to believe that those standards would not be met. And the final one, public benefits that are appropriate to the surrounding neighborhood and the city as a whole will be derived from the approval of the requested site development allowances. Again, public housing is one of the greatest benefits that we're seeing from this, and City Council is really the ones who have the purview over what public benefits they want to put in. That's something we really don't get involved too deeply in, so I believe that that standard is also met. Is everyone in agreement with my finding on special use for planned developments? All right. Now we come to the part of the evening where I ask for conditions. Staff has put forward 4 conditions that they had requested, and I think there might be some others coming from commissioners. The 4 that staff has put forth are, number 1, the proposed development shall substantially comply with the documents and testimony on record. The applicant shall agree to a construction management plan before issuance of a building permit. The applicant agrees to comply with all City of Evanston Green Building Ordinance and will obtain a LEED Silver certification rating or equivalent net zero. We had said LEED Gold. Okay, I was going to say, I thought that was supposed to be gold. And finally, the applicant to continue to work with staff on design details for the north and east building facades. The other one that I heard mentioned was not permitting them to get away with no loading berth, but to figure out some way to figure out where we can put a loading berth for moving in, moving out, those sorts of things.
That would be correct.
Is there anything else condition-wise that is?
This may be covered by the construction management plan, but I do think it should be mentioned that there should be a vibration monitoring program for the surrounding residences.
I think that's a great idea. I would also recommend, I think the developer should be put in touch. I don't know if there's a neighborhood group over there. Is there a neighborhood group over there?
We do have a neighborhood watch, and there's the Southeast Evanston Association.
Okay.
So, we can do that because we did have problems when the courts went in.
Okay.
And that was brought up at the meeting with Melissa Wayne.
All right.
And Johanna and people did say they would put in monitoring. That was it.
So what what I'm gonna recommend is that if possible, we look at following, again, my closest model is the Anne Rainey Apartments, because I was heavily involved in what was going on there. The developer was regularly reaching out to that neighborhood community group, checking in with when they were going to be making the most noise, when they were having the largest impact, checking in to make sure that things were going well. So I would make that part of that construction plan as well, which I think is a little more above and beyond kind of what our typical construction management plan has.
What do you call that?
Neighborhood outreach?
As I say, continuing neighborhood engagement. Staff knows what I'm talking about, and I trust that they will follow that in moving it forward. Everybody else?
Did you want to add something about trying to reduce the height, Commissioner Miranchev?
I would say that it's good to put a recommendation, but I think that the project as designed probably will not do it. That's my problem with, once again, I don't have problem with the zoning allowances and the zoning change, but I think that the project needs significant rework in order to pass at least my vote.
I don't know the solution here, and I understand that you're doing a bearing wall system, and that's why you have the joists, as opposed to reinforced concrete, which is more expensive than this system. There are systems out there, they're precast systems, and 1717 Ridge used this because there was a height limit that was strictly had to be followed, and it's a proprietary system, and there are probably others that use a half of a steel beam. Strange, but it reduces the floor to floor, and it's, I don't know if it's as cheap as bearing wall, but it's cheaper than poured in place concrete, and it's light. So.
One other thing that staff has brought to my attention, we do not go through the general conditions and standards for planned developments anymore since we've come up with our own standards. But I would just make maybe a condition that those be observed to the best of their abilities. Those are a lot of things that are just kind of guidelines more so than our standards. So I would request that that be put into our conditions as well. So with that, I will ask if there is a motion from one of the commissioners to make a recommendation to City Council.
I will move that we make a positive recommendation to City Council in the case of 504-514 South Boulevard, 23 PLND-0027, to grant the allowances described in the packet, with the exception of requiring either the off-street loading berth or some other solution to accommodate move-in, move-out, and also requiring some sort of neighborhood monitoring program, which staff understands, and also to work with staff to investigate minimizing floor depth. And then what was the last one, Matt, you said?
Well, that's all part of the construction management plan.
Okay.
As well as the conditions that were outlined by staff.
Oh, thank you. In addition to the recommended conditions on page 10 of the packet.
All right. It's been moved by Commissioner Puctel. Is there any second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Lindwall. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Linwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mudinchev?
No.
Commissioner Puctel?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes. So with a vote of 5-1, the motion for a positive recommendation to City Council will move forward, as well then as the 5-0 vote for the map amendment, so those will go forward together. Is there anything else that we need to do on this particular case, or I can move on to our communications? First off, before I move to communications, I want to say thank you for everyone who did come out tonight. Again, sorry it's a late night. We're having a lot of these lately, staff.
Kens?
But thankfully we were able to get through everything in one night. So at this point, communication from staff.
Do you want to ask it? All right, so to respond to our standard question, where are we at with the comprehensive plan? I just routed for signatures the final contract with HDR. It's taken some back and forth and coordination with them to get that signed. We've had one conversation with the consultant team, and they're working on preparing a preliminary work plan for that process. So it's anticipated a couple more months of coordination on, the process and how this is all going to roll out, the engagement plan, and then we'll be circling back with more details at that time. So,
Thank you. Anything else? I'll ask if there's an opportunity for public comment, although I'll note that most of the public has left the room. So the next item up is our adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Lindwall, seconded by Puctel. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We do stand adjourned until our next meeting, which will be on Wednesday, September 27th at 7 p.m. in council chambers, where we will continue our discussion of Ryan Field.